Chapter 79, The Spirit Perception of a Weapon Refinement Master. Chapter 79, The Spirit Perception of a Weapon Refinement Master. That rebuttal by the disheveled old man nearly choked Feng Haoyu to death. He was clearly being unreasonable and dishonest about it. However, with his status as the peak master of Weapon Peak, Feng Haoyu could not say anything about his indignance and could only swallow it. While all the disciples watched enviously, the disheveled old man brought Su Zimo and Feng Haoyu into the inner hall. The inner hall wasn't large at merely dozens of square meters. The walls were lined densely with more than 1,000 jade scrolls. Most of them were dim in color except for 100 or so that shone lusciously bright. The disheveled old man pointed at the jade scrolls on the wall. These are the projections left by weapon refinement masters since the beginning of Ethereal Sect. Those bright ones are the projections of the successful spirit weapon refinements. Even though the remaining ones are projections of failures, they are of weapon refinement masters as well. Each of you can choose 10 to observe. Even though it seemed as though there were many jade scrolls, one had to understand that Ethereal Sect was founded thousands of years ago. Yet, only these jade scrolls remained and majority of them were projections of failures. Without thinking twice, Feng Haoyu went for 10 lusciously bright jade scrolls. Those were projections of successful spirit weapon refinements. Su Zimo mulled for a short period of time before choosing 5 bright and 5 dim ones. He understood that while there were things to learn from successes, he could also learn how to prevent similar mistakes from happening by looking at the failures. When the disheveled old man saw that, he nodded to himself. For a weapon refinement master, it was difficult to replicate the successes of others. However, they could prevent similar mistakes. That was a form of wisdom as well. Su Zimo took the 10 jade scrolls and assumed a lotus position. Injecting spirit chi into the scrolls, the patterns on them shone brightly as a clear image appeared before him. He was immersed into it, deepening his insights towards weapon refinement while clearing the many doubts he had accumulated. In the blink of an eye, a day and night had passed. Feng Haoyu stood up and returned the 10 jade scrolls. He took a casual glance at Su Zimo, who was still immersed in learning, and left the weapon refinement hall. Before long, Su Zimo stood up and returned the jade scrolls too. How was it? You've learned a lot, right? The disheveled old man asked, smiling. Su Zimo nodded his head and asked after pondering, indeed, I've learned something for the first 4 steps of weapon refinement. However, I'm still clueless towards spirit gathering. The difficulty of spirit gathering lies in the fact that spirit chi existed in a stable state within the materials. However, after the smelting and combining process, there is a stark change to the structure of the flying sword. Because of that, it is astronomically difficult to infuse the spirit chi back into the flying sword. Coupled with the fact that the flying sword would be heated to a scarlet-red state, any misalignment in synergy would result in an immediate explosion. The disheveled old man then sighed gently. It's not just you. Even advanced weapon refinement masters would not dare to proclaim a 100% spirit gathering success rate. Most of them develop a sense of spirit perception after many years of refining weapons. The mention of that had Su Zimo's heart skipping a beat. Spirit perception? Through the experience of life and death as well as the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Su Zimo had already developed a sense of spirit perception. However, could he apply that same spirit perception to spirit gathering? His mind began to tinker, wondering if he could work in that direction. Head back first. If you've got any doubts, feel free to look for me here at any time. As he said that, the disheveled old man pointed to the jade scrolls on the wall and winked to Su Zimo. Suddenly, Su Zimo realized what the disheveled old man meant. He was hinting to Su Zimo that by coming over to look for him, the latter could seize the opportunity to look through the jade scrolls on the wall. Thank you, Master. Su Zimo bowed with a warm sense of thankfulness seeping into his heart. The moment he walked out of the weapon refinement hall, he saw someone at the entrance. Feng Haoyu. He seemed to have waited for a long time. Su Zimo frowned slightly. Right as he was about to summon a flying sword to return to his cave abode, Feng Haoyu turned around and with a slightly reared head, blocked Su Zimo's path with his hand. Is there anything? Su Zimo found himself irked by the haughty expression of this man. Feng Haoyu replied indifferently, at the end of this year, I want to make history in Ethereal's sect and be the top of 3 peaks with Weapon Peak being one of them. Junior brother Su, you're a smart man. I'm sure you know what to do. I don't, Su Zimo shook his head expressionlessly. Are you challenging me? Feng Haoyu narrowed his gaze and released his level 7 chi condensation. Instantly, a cold gust of wind shrouded around him. You're crazy. With a cold scoff, Su Zimo rode his flying sword and left the weapon refinement hall in the blink of an eye, disappearing from Feng Haoyu's sights. Back in the cave abode, Su Zimo sat on his bed and thought about the contents of the 10 jade scrolls. Before long, a hurried knock sounded on his door. Bro, it's me. It was Little Fatty's voice. They had not seen one another in a month and Little Fatty was at level 6 chi condensation as well. The cultivation speed of those with a heaven spirit root was indeed frightening. There was a high chance that Feng Haoyu, Leng Ro, and the Little Fatty could be at level 9 or perfected chi condensation before the end of the year. Bro, I heard that you made an enemy out of Feng Haoyu. That was Little Fatty's first question. Su Zimo asked, you even know about something like that? It's not just me. News of this has already spread through all 5 peaks and many disciples are talking about it. Little Fatty then sighed. Bro, that's a little irrational. Each of us can cultivate on our own. What has that got to do with anything? Su Zimo chuckled casually, totally indifferent about it. Things are not that simple. Little Fatty continued, the sect prohibits disciples from killing one another internally and therefore you can reject even if he comes to challenge you. However, things are different out of the sect. Bro, you can't stay in the sect forever, right? Most of the sect's missions require you to head out. Feng Haoyu has gathered a lot of disciples on his side by now. The moment you step out of the sect, many of them are going to cause trouble for you. Su Zimo raised his brow without saying anything. Little Fatty went on, actually, given Feng Haoyu's endowment, he will definitely be at Foundation Establishment Realm after the 5 peaks face-off and promote to be an inner sect disciple. Bro, you can actually just avoid him this time round and take part in next year's face-off. That way, he'll owe you a favor too. Let's discuss this another time. Su Zimo declined to comment further. Little Fatty nodded. No matter what, I'll always be on your side, bro. If you need me for anything, just say the word. Alright, Su Zimo smiled. The both of them continued chatting casually before Little Fatty left. Su Zimo pondered quietly within his cave abode, deciding to head out of the sect for a bit. He was getting a little anxious now that there was no progress for the marrow cleansing section in an entire month. When he had first cultivated the bovine-tongued saber, he only understood the essence of it by observing a cow eating grass. This time round, Su Zimo decided to capture a tiger and leopard at a forest nearby the sect so that he could take a deeper look at things. Chapter 80, Change of Appearance. Chapter 80, Change of Appearance. Since he had joined, Su Zimo had not left the sect nor taken on any missions. Since he wanted to head out, Su Zimo decided to take on a mission along the way to earn some contribution points. Arriving at the mission stele of Weapon Peak, he raised his head and looked. The mission stele was divided into 2 sections. The upper section contained missions for the 5 peaks that any disciples could take on, while the lower section only had missions of Weapon Peak reserved for their own disciples. The further front the mission was, the more difficult it would be and the more contribution points earned. Great Rock Forest. It was located dozens of miles northward of Ethereal Peak and was abound in pure gold, a crucial material for refining flying swords. The mission to gather materials was not considered to be difficult. However, because it was in Great Rock Forest, the difficulty level became much more significant, even slightly treacherous in fact. Every single mountain range and forest was bound to contain beasts. Around the outer regions, most of the beasts were either wild ones or weak spirit ones. Yet, the deeper one ventured, the stronger the beasts were. In fact, spirit demons may even be found right in the core regions. If targeted by a spirit demon, even a Foundation establishment cultivator may not be able to escape unscathed. The gold mine was located right in the core region of Great Rock Forest. This was a mission for Weapon Peak, and even though it was already listed for some time, no one really dared to take it on. Great Rock Forest was one of the nearest forests to Ethereal Sect. Because Su Zimo had intended to head over to begin with, he took on the mission out of convenience. A sleepy elderly man rested at the mission station. From Shui, Su Zimo learnt that this was one of Weapon Peak's 3 elders, Elder Lu. The disheveled old man, Elderly, who kept guard over the Weapon Peak, and Elder Lu were the 3 elders of Weapon Peak. In Ethereal Peak, anyone who could gain the title of Elder had to be in the Golden Core realm at least. Su Zimo came before Elder Lu and handed the latter his sect badge. Raising his head, Elder Lu frowned before throwing the sect badge back to Su Zimo and barking coldly, "Not allowed to go." "Why?" Su Zimo asked. Elder Lu rolled his eyes and replied, "Are you stupid, lad? You want to court death going to Great Rock Forest with level 5 chi condensation? Even perfected chi refinement warriors would have to form a team to take on this mission. I just want to go take a look. If it's dangerous, I'll leave for sure," Su Zimo smiled. In truth, even though Great Rock Forest was dangerous, the mission wasn't too difficult for someone like Su Zimo who had spirit perception. "You think you can escape if you really come across any danger?" Elder Lu pouted his lips. "Look how weak you are. Say, don't blame me for not reminding you if you die out there." "Don't worry, Elder. I'm not going to die. I'm quite the lucky man," Su Zimo chuckled. Harumphing coldly, Elder Lu made a record and the mission on the steel dimmed in color, indicating that someone had taken it on. After a brief silence, Elder Lu pulled out an intricate paper crane from his storage bag and passed it to Su Zimo. "This spirit crane is used for communications in our sect. If you really encounter trouble, you just have to let this fly." "Thank you, Elder." Su Zimo kept the spirit crane in his storage bag and cupped his fists before leaving Weapon Peak on his flying sword. Closing his eyes lazily, Elder Lu went back to sleep before grumbling, "Juniors these days really don't know what's good for them." This was Su Zimo's first time out of the peak after joining it for a month. He took out the spirit crane that Elder Lu gave him and observed it. He had seen something like this before once. Back in Yen Country's capital, when Su Zimo was chasing after the one-armed cultivator from Joyful Clan, the latter had sent a similar paper crane to inform his sect about it. There were mysterious patterns drawn on the paper crane and it would be activated by injecting spirit chi. Su Zimo had a hunch that this paper crane was in reality a type of talisman. Keeping it, he suddenly frowned as something jolted through his heart. Someone was following him. Su Zimo scoffed internally. For someone to follow him right after leaving the sect? There was no need to think further, the stalker was definitely from their sect. Could little fatty be right? Feng Haoyu is really trying to cause trouble for me outside? With an unchanged expression, Su Zimo sped towards the direction of Great Rock Forest without any reaction. Before long, he arrived at the border of Great Rock Forest. Along the way, Su Zimo had gathered vaguely that there were 5 people in total behind him. The strongest of them was already at level 9 chi condensation. If these guys are truly sent by Feng Haoyu, he really thinks highly of me. Su Zimo laughed and without hesitation, dove right into the forest. Entering the forest was akin to entering Su Zimo's territory. Here, no one was his match. Su Zimo cast away his flying sword and sprinted on his feet, zipping left and right. Before long, he lost the people trailing him and arrived at a secluded spot where he abandoned his green robes and bared his upper body. A series of cracking sounds came forth from within Su Zimo as his tendons and bones screamed together while his body expanded. In the blink of an eye, he had grown to over 2 meters tall with his flesh swelled and muscles bound together. His body had inflated entirely. Su Zimo's facial muscles contorted and joined together bizarrely. After a split second, his features had changed as he transformed into a fierce, burly man with a naked upper body. With the first 3 sections of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness completed, Su Zimo could change his appearance from head to toe such that even those close to him would not be able to recognize him. Lowering his head, Su Zimo laughed and with a swift dash, disappeared from where he was. Senior brother Zhou, where did that Su Zimo run off to? How did we suddenly lose track of him? That's why I said we should have made a move earlier on. How are we going to find him now that he slipped into Great Rock Forest? Shut up. Zhou Wei's face was grim as he hollered, we were so close to the sect just now. What if a disciple heading out spots us making a move at him? We'll be punished when we head back if that happens. Zhou Wei was a trial disciple of Spirit Peak. At level 9 Qi condensation, he was quite a somebody within it too. Then came someone like Feng Haoyu with a variant spirit root and a heavenly defying endowment, defeating him with a mere level 7 Qi condensation. Zhou Wei had submitted completely in the face of Feng Haoyu's strength. Even though he conducted this operation on his own accord, it was with Feng Haoyu's silent consent. Apart from Zhou Wei at level 9 Qi condensation, there were 4 others at level 7 and 8, these people were enough to teach Su Zimo a harsh lesson. Look again carefully. That Su Zimo is only at level 5 Qi condensation. How far can he run? He's definitely at the perimeter of Great Rock Forest, Zhou Wei analyzed calmly. A Spirit Peak disciple asked, what if he already ran inside Great Rock Forest? That's for the best. If that lad gets shredded apart by the spirit beasts, he only has himself to blame, Zhou Wei replied with a cold snicker. Another Spirit Peak disciple asked, how should we deal with Su Zimo if we find him? A cold look flashed through Zhou Wei's eyes as he spoke darkly, we're forbidden to murder or cripple any fellow disciples of their martial arts. However, we can injure him severely by breaking his bones and tendons. If he can't get out of bed for the whole year, he naturally won't be able to take part in the year-end face-off for Weapon Peak. Chapter 81, I'm Innocent. Chapter 81, I'm Innocent. At a towering ancient tree nearby, a burly man with a bare upper body stood hidden within the leaves, listening clearly to everything that Zhou Wei and the others said. A cold glint flickered through the burly man's eyes. A gust of wind blew by, rustling the wind as the burly man leapt off from the tree swiftly and landed silently. Laying low to the ground, he trawled through the grass on both hands and legs, heading in the direction of Zhou Wei and the rest. He was perfectly hidden within the grass, which was around half the height of an average man. If one were to look down, they would merely feel like the grass was moving in a straight line due to the wind. No one would be able to tell that it was a person. Senior brother Zhou, should we split up and search? Sounds like a plan. That Su Zimo's only at level 5 Qi condensation. Any of us is enough to capture him. Zhou Wei nodded. We'll do that then. Everyone, split up and look. What are you guys looking for? The moment Zhou Wei said that, a hoarse and chilling voice rang out behind him. When Qi refinement warriors travel on their flying swords, they would not be too high up from the ground at around 3 meters max unless necessary. That was because the higher they were, the more spirit Qi they would expend. Right then, a burly man with a bare upper body stood up behind Zhou Wei. He was a full 2 meters tall with rock-like muscles on his body, looking as though they could explode at any moment. He was just like a god that had suddenly descended with a ferocious expression. Instantly, Zhou Wei was so scared he could feel his blood curdle. He did not manage to sense someone approaching so closely to him. Suddenly, the burly man reached out and pulled Zhou Wei by the feet, yanking him down and smashing him into the ground right in front of the other 4 Spirit Peak disciples. Bam! There was a deafening sound. A human-shaped pit appeared in the ground. In the hands of this burly man, a level 9 Qi condensation cultivator like Zhou Wei was rendered helpless like a baby. Zhou Wei laid helplessly in the pit, foaming blood from his mouth with his eyes rolled back. Most of his bones were broken and his organs crushed as he fainted right then. His body was the only thing moving as it convulsed subconsciously. After smashing Zhou Wei, the burly man moved and his gaze shifted to two level 8 Qi refinement warriors. The two of them felt the blood drain from their face and without hesitation, tried to soar into the skies. However, the burly man was faster than them and with a lightning leap, he yanked the both of them down from midair. Bang! Bang! It was the exact same situation. Both of the Spirit Peak disciples fainted on the spot after being smashed by the burly man. Yikes! The remaining two Spirit Peak disciples were pale as a sheet as they summoned a flying sword before pointing their fingers at the burly man. Instantly, the flying swords turned into streams of light that shot out. One of them was aimed at the burly man's glabella while the other targeted his chest. Those were both fatal areas. Giving off a malicious grin, the burly man did not try to dodge as he dashed towards them. When the two Spirit Peak disciples saw that, they heaved a sigh of relief. That mysterious man was an idiot with brute strength after all. This was someone that did not know how strong cultivators were, such that he didn't even know to dodge against flying swords. Clang! Clang! A clanging sound rang off when they met with the burly man's glabella and chest. The flying swords were sent flying instead. Without the slightest bit of damage, the burly man continued rushing towards the two men. "A monster!" One of the Spirit Peak disciples yelled out in a quivering tone. His face was totally pale, he was so scared he forgot he had to run away anymore. The other disciple controlled the flying sword beneath his feet and ran as far as he could. With a casual punch, the burly man knocked the frozen disciple away. He then continued running on all fours, leaving nothing but shadows as he chased after the escaped disciple. With a rapid leap, he hopped around a couple of towering ancient trees to close the height distance. "Come on down." Laughing, the burly man gripped the disciple's calf and yanked him down from midair. Snap! That single grip by the burly man snapped the disciple's calf on the spot. Ah! 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 Sweating pouring down his forehead, the disciple howled in pain. Whisking that disciple, the burly man returned to their original place and grabbed the other four who had passed out. Carrying 3 on one hand and 2 on the other, he sped outside in huge steps. Who are you? We are disciples of Ethereal Sect. How dare you attack us? Our sect will definitely not let you off if they know about it. Guochong, who was the only disciple awake, yelled at the burly man. The burly man remained silent as he dashed through the forest. Guochong found himself getting more fearful by the moment as he said in trembles, "Where are you taking us to?" "Sir, please let us go." "Sir, I know I'm in the wrong now." Suddenly, the burly man halted in his tracks and looked down at Guochong icily, asking coolly, "What did you do wrong?" I. Guochong was stumped by the question. He had only mentioned it out of nervousness previously, but he did not know what he had done wrong. Guochong cursed internally as he did not know where this burly man had spouted out from. Without saying anything, the latter started striking at them, and this person was unreasonably strong. None of their cultivation methods had worked on this burly man at all. After the burly man stopped in his tracks, he tossed all 5 of them on the ground and turned to leave without saying anything more. A look of disbelief spread past Guochong's face. They were alive? The burly man did not kill them. Guochong looked around. They were outside the great rock forest right now, and he did not know why the burly man had brought them out and left them here before leaving himself. "Sir, may I know your name and the sect you're from?" Guochong shouted out indignantly. Suddenly, the burly man stopped in his tracks and turned around before walking towards him once more. Guochong broke into a shudder, wishing that he could slap himself on the mouth as he hurriedly said, "Sir, I really know where I've gone wrong this time round. I should not have asked for your name." Arriving before the 5 of them, the burly man grabbed their storage bags and took away all their spirit stones and elixirs before keeping them in his own storage bag. Looking at his robbed empty storage bag, Guochong wanted to break out in tears. Snickering, the burly man turned towards Great Rock Forest and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Guochong opened his storage bag with shaking hands and dug out a paper crane, writing on it with spirit chi. We've been attacked at Great Rock Forest. The opponent is unknown and extremely strong. Please send reinforcements from the sect. Injecting spirit chi to it, the spirit crane spread its wings and transformed into a beam of light, disappearing into the skies. Guochong was injured as well and was unable to carry the other 4 back, merely able to wait there for the sect's reinforcements. Looking at his fellow fainted disciples, he felt despair swallowing him from within. The thought of his savings for the past few years being robbed completely by some unknown mysterious burly man had him howling out in sadness, "I'm innocent." Chapter 82, Pure Gold Crystal. Chapter 82, Pure Gold Crystal. The mysterious burly man was of course Su Zimo. Upon returning to Great Rock Forest, he reverted to his appearance and wore his green robes, looking like a scholar once more as he sped towards the core region. The decision to change his appearance was one Su Zimo made after a lengthy consideration. Even though it was true that Zhou Wei's gang was there to cause trouble for him, something like that was difficult to explain to the sect. If all 5 of them were to deny it, he could do nothing about it too. Instead, he might even be the one punished for injuring them so badly. At the same time, Su Zimo's ace in the bag was his strength at melee combat and he did not wish to have it revealed so early. Furthermore, all he had to do was change his appearance and identity and that would be reason enough for him to loot their spirit stones and elixirs entirely. While they might feel wronged about it, they would have nowhere to complain. After all, the mysterious burly man did not exist in this world. As he approached the core of the forest, Su Zimo kept his flying sword and landed on the ground. Danger lurked all around within the forest and Su Zimo was much more agile on the ground than the flying sword. If he met with any danger, he would be able to dodge it at the first instance. Along the way, he could sense the auras of spirit beasts. However, Su Zimo did not engage in battle and instead chose to avoid them, sprinting towards the core region of Great Rock Forest. There was a forest of ores not too far away. There, pure gold laid abundantly on the ground and shimmered brightly as Su Zimo tread over carefully. He could sense a hint of danger within the forest. There was definitely some extremely strong spirit beast or demon reigning over the area. Within the middle of the forest beside a large pure gold ore, a spirit beast with a thick armor sprawled on the ground. Its armor shone with a luscious shade of gold, covering its neck and limbs while its tail was filled with spikes. Gold Eater Beast. Surviving by devouring all sorts of spirit materials and ores, it possessed a cruel nature and an immense strength. Invulnerable to weapons, there was almost no weakness to it. It was clear that the Gold Eater before them was almost at the realm of a spirit demon. This was troubling. Su Zimo frowned. If it was any other spirit beast, he had the confidence of killing it there and then. However, he had no way of dealing with this Gold Eater at all. Suddenly, the Gold Eater which was initially fast asleep opened its eyes and glared at Su Zimo sharply with an immense killing intent. Roar! Rising in the blink of an eye, it hollered in the direction of Su Zimo and sprinted over. Narrowing his gaze coldly, Su Zimo pushed his feet and activated the Plow Heaven Stride. Instantly, 2 deep ravines appeared beneath his feet on the ground as the mud flipped over. Against the pounce of the Gold Eater, Su Zimo held his ground firmly as his aura began to rise. Right after Plow Heaven Stride, he leaned forward with mountain reliance. Bang! The man and beast had collided into one another. Su Zimo was knocked half a step back while the Gold Eater was sent flying away, only stopping after crushing through a number of gold ores. Haha! Su Zimo burst out in laughter. It was at that moment that he realized his physique had evolved to a terrifying degree after he tempered it using spirit chi with the foundation of the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Even the Gold Eater's strength was not enough to withstand an impact against him. A trace of fear flickered through the Gold Eater's eyes. Activating Divine Steed Fleeting, Su Zimo appeared before the Gold Eater in the blink of an eye as he retrieved the cold moon saber from his storage bag and slashed towards its head. Clang! Sparks flew everywhere. The cold moon saber rebounded and the Gold Eater was totally unharmed. At the same time, it shook its spiked tail and swept through the air, landing squarely on Su Zimo's chest. With lightning speed, Su Zimo mentally cultivated his body petrification, causing his flesh to expand and his muscles to harden. Bang! Su Zimo fell over, slamming onto the biggest pure gold ore in the middle of the forest, causing cracks to form densely on it. The Gold Eater glared at the ore behind Su Zimo and looked a little unnerved. Rubbing his chest, Su Zimo kept his cold moon saber. The cold moon saber was no longer useful. Su Zimo could only use his own strength to fight against the Gold Eater. Once more, the man and beast fought to a corner. Opening its mouth, the Gold Eater chomped at Su Zimo, aiming for his neck. Without fear, Su Zimo suddenly reached out with both hands and grabbed the upper and lower jaws of the Gold Eater, yanking it with ferocious force. Pust! Heaving a deep breath of air, mighty as the anaconda eclipse, his chest puffed up robustly as he spun around mightily. It was a frightening sight as green veins popped up all over his arms like snakes coiling around it. Open up! With a holler, Su Zimo continued to tear. Shing! Blood filled the entire place as organs fell to the ground, creating a foul stench all around. The Gold Eater was torn into half by Su Zimo. Breathing heavily, he tossed the corpse of the Gold Eater away casually and began collecting the gold ores around. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. Within a shattered pile of gold ores stood a large pure gold crystal. It illuminated with a mysterious gleam and was almost transparent. Pure gold crystal! Su Zimo exclaimed. A pure gold crystal was an extremely rare item amongst gold ores and was hard to produce. At the same time, it was a crucial material for the refinement of middle or even superior grade spirit weapons. I'm going to be rich. His head went into a frenzied excitement as he kept the pure gold crystal that was around the height of an average man in his storage bag. Su Zimo then shattered all the other gold ores around, but he found no more pure gold crystals. Even then, his reward for this trip was far more than he had imagined. After collecting all the gold ores around, he turned around to leave. Before long, a green-robed scholar carried a spirit tiger on his left arm and a spirit leopard on his right, walking out of the forest. At the same time, the spirit crane that Guochong sent back to Spirit Peak caused quite a stir. An elder of Spirit Peak headed towards Great Rock Forest personally with a group of disciples. Weapon Peak. Out of extreme boredom, the disheveled old man was out roaming around the top of the peak. Arriving at the mission Stele, he raised his head and remarked in soft surprise, "The mission for Great Rock Forests given out? Do we have such promising disciples that would head there?" Elder Lu beside the mission Stele opened his eyes lazily and harumphed, "Some brazen lad at level 5 chi condensation went there alone. I had to give him a spirit crane in case he gets into trouble." Level 5 chi condensation? The disheveled old man frowned. As though he recalled something, he suddenly yanked Elder Lu's wrist. "What's the name of that lad? Su Zimo or something?" Piak. The disheveled old man slapped on the desk heavily, scaring Elder Lu so badly that he woke up right away. "Are you crazy? What's with that?" Elder Lu glared and scolded. "You're the crazy one." The disheveled old man yelled back, "That lad's the only one in Weapon Peak that can cultivate a level 3 spirit fire, but you bloody let him go to Great Rock Forest alone? I'll kill you." "He's the one that cultivated the level 3 spirit fire?" Elder Lu was stumped too. With a grim expression, the disheveled old man exclaimed, "Sleep, sleep and sleep. That's the only thing you know to do day and night. That lad's our only hope for Weapon Peak. If anything happens to you, I'll never let you off." Stunned for a moment, Elder Lu leapt to his feet and urged, "Let's not waste any more time. Hurry to Great Rock Forest and save the lad." Chapter 83, The Mind of a Spirit Tiger. Chapter 83, The Mind of a Spirit Tiger. In order to avoid Zhou Wei's gang, Su Zimo made a detour intentionally, and he somehow ended up avoiding the Elder of Spirit Peak as well as the disheveled old man too. When he returned to Weapon Peak and wanted to hand in the mission, he realized that Elder Lu had disappeared. "Where's Elder Lu?" Su Zimo asked some of the Weapon Peak disciples passing by. "I'm not sure either, but I saw him quarreling with Master before the both of them left in a hurry." "I've got no idea where they went," the disciple shook his head. Su Zimo did not think too much about it and returned to his cave abode with the spirit tiger and leopard. Both beasts had already attained spirit intellect and had wisdom equivalent to that of a grown man. Their eyes revealed a deep fear as they were brought back to Su Zimo's cave abode. The beasts knew that even for human cultivators, their bodies were weak. Yet, this man before them was different. His body was even stronger than theirs. Neither the spirit tiger or leopard knew why this man wanted to take them back to his cave abode. Kill us? Eat us? Force us to a blood oath to enslave us? Or... The spirit tiger shrugged its head as though it thought of something. When it saw the strange look in Su Zimo's eyes, shivers broke down its spine. Could this man have some sort of special fetish? It's over, it's over. I've kept my chastity for so many years. Am I going to lose it to a human? Suddenly, the spirit tiger was terrified after being convinced that it knew what Su Zimo was up to. Indignant, the spirit tiger looked at Su Zimo with a sad and begrudging gaze containing complex emotions. That gaze sent goosebumps across Su Zimo's back as well as he slapped casually. "What's wrong with you?" That slap merely made the spirit tiger feel even more aggrieved. It's really over. Not only does this man want to do that to me, he's spanking me. An influx of emotions gushed into the spirit tiger's heart as two hot streams of tears almost filled its face. At the side, the spirit leopard stayed silently without budging. However, its eyes would flicker with a ferocious look every now and then. Su Zimo came before the two spirit beasts and said gruffly, "Both of you, cry out. Spirit tiger. Spirit leopard." The spirit tiger lamented in his heart. This man's fetish is really kinky. He wants us to cry out before doing that to us. The spirit leopard did not dare to wait as it cried out softly. It was a sound as soft as a mosquito, unlike the earth-shaking howls often made by spirit beasts in the forests. The reason why Su Zimo had brought the spirit tiger and leopard back was because he wanted to unravel the secret behind their noises as required by the marrow cleansing section. However, the spirit leopard was already terrified after being beaten up by Su Zimo. How would it dare to roar in his face? Wouldn't that be courting death? Su Zimo was stunned for a moment as he looked at the spirit tiger subconsciously. It broke into a shudder and sighed internally. Sigh, look how imposing he is. This is where my reputation ends. From now on, I'm his. Sprawled on the ground, the spirit tiger leaned towards Su Zimo and winked its eyes. With slight embarrassment and shyness, it cried out. Meow. After crying out, it even looked at the spirit leopard with glee as though it was implying. See that? That's the way you cry out. For some reason, Su Zimo felt all his goosebumps rising with that cry as he kicked out instinctively. Bang! Before the glee disappeared from the spirit tiger's eyes, it was sent flying by Su Zimo's kick. The spirit leopard's mouth opened widely as it nearly burst out into laughter. Leaping up, the spirit tiger was enraged and hollered internally. Bloody hell! I'm not giving in anymore. However, when it met with Su Zimo's cold gaze, the spirit tiger's courage disappeared as it sprawled on the ground and purred out coyly once more. At this point, it had none of the ferociousness and might a king of the forest should have. If he hadn't seen and heard it himself, Su Zimo might have thought that he had captured a large kitten instead of a tiger. Even though the spirit tiger was indignant, Su Zimo was even more troubled. He wanted to unravel the secrets of the marrow cleansing section through these two beasts, but yet, he had caught two unusual beasts. The spirit leopard was slightly more normal, albeit cowardly. But the spirit tiger was just in heat right now. And the weirdest thing was that this spirit tiger was a male. Looking at the two spirit beasts moodily, Su Zimo wondered if he should slay them for food instead. The two spirit beasts had sharp senses. As though they could sense Su Zimo's killing intent, both sprawled onto the ground and cried pitifully in horror. Sighing internally, Su Zimo knocked that thought out of his head for now. Great Rock Forest. Elder Pei Fu of Spirit Peak arrived at Great Rock Forest with 12 inner sect disciples and saw Zhou Wei's gang. By now, all of them had already woken up. However, because they were injured severely, none of them could move and were moaning on the spot frailly. After arriving, Pei Fu swept his gaze across them. He only relaxed after ascertaining that they were not in mortal danger as he asked grimly, "What happened? Who did this?" "I don't know." Guochong was on the brink of tears as he cried indignantly, "The 5 of us merely came by Great Rock Forest's area for a stroll." However, a burly man with a bare upper body appeared out of nowhere and without saying anything, beat the 5 of us up. "What's his name?" "I don't know." "Which sect is he from?" "I don't know." Pei Fu barked, "What do you know then?" "I only know he's a burly man." Pei Fu went silent for a moment before asking again, "What's the cultivation of the other party?" "Perfected qi condensation," Guochong replied instantly. In reality, the 5 of them knew that the other party was only at level 5 qi condensation. However, if word were to spread within the sect that 5 disciples of Spirit Peak were beaten up by a burly man of level 5 qi condensation, they would turn into a laughing stock. That was why the 5 of them had already decided beforehand that they would insist the other party was a perfected qi condensation. Frowning, Pei Fu asked, "But your injuries don't seem like they were inflicted by a cultivator?" "Elder, you don't understand. That person must have cultivated some sort of body tempering technique such that he is extremely strong in melee combat. My flying sword couldn't even scratch him." Guochong explained hurriedly. "Why aren't you guys consuming any elixirs after being injured so badly then? You're waiting for death?" The burly man robbed out storage bags clean and were only left with a couple of pseudo-spirit weapons now. Sighing, Pei Fu gestured with his hand. The inner sect disciples behind him rushed up right away and took out their jade bottles, pouring some elixirs to feed the 5 of them. Right then, 2 figures appeared through the air and arrived before them with lightning speed. They were Weapon Peak's master, the disheveled old man and Elder Lu. The disheveled old man furrowed his brows. "Why are you guys here?" Pei Fu sighed, "Our disciples met with an attack and we're here for reinforcements." "Why are you guys here?" "Don't tell me a disciple of Weapon Peak met with danger too." The disheveled old man and Elder Lu exchanged glances as they cast a worried look at Guochong's gang before asking darkly, "Have you guys seen our trial disciple, Su Zimo?" "Why yes." Slightly guilty, Guochong pointed towards Great Rock Forest. "I saw him entering Great Rock Forest and he hasn't come out yet." "It's over." Both the disheveled old man and Elder Lu felt their hearts sinking. Chapter 84, A Lump of. Chapter 84, A Lump of. When Pei Fu saw how terrible the disheveled old man and Elder Lu was, he could not help but ask, "Why?" "That trial disciple of yours. He's the only one in Weapon Peak that can cultivate a level 3 spirit fire." The disheveled old man's tone was grim. "Level 3 spirit fire." Pei Fu exclaimed, "I've also heard the news that a weapon refinement prodigy appeared in Weapon Peak." "So, that's Su Zimo." Elder Lu replied darkly, "We're headed into Great Rock Forest." "I won't believe it unless I see the lad's corpse for myself." Pei Fu replied, "Let's go. I'll accompany you guys." He had the inner sect disciples behind him escort Zhou Wei's gang back before heading into Great Rock Forest together with the disheveled old man and Elder Lu. The 3 of them split up and looked around for an entire day to no avail. Finally, they arrived at the core region of Great Rock Forest to find the 2 halves of the Gold Eater's corpse. This gold eater's almost reaching a spirit demon realm, but it was killed here. Look at the tragic state of its body. It's almost as though it was torn apart entirely. What ferocious strength. Pei Fu murmured softly before saying apprehensively, could it be the burly man? What burly man? The disheveled old man asked. Pei Fu related the assault of the 5 men before continuing grimly, based on what Guo said, the burly man is extremely strong in melee combat with tremendous strength. Be it whether he's of another sect or some practitioner of the dark path, this matter is not to be taken lightly. It's clear that the burly man did not intend to kill or Guo and the others would not have stayed alive. Elder Lu analyzed. Besides, the burly man brought the 5 of them out of Great Rock Forest before he left. It's clear that he's worried they might be injured by the spirit beasts within Great Rock Forest. That man's a mystery. We can't tell if he's a friend or foe just yet. The disheveled old man nodded in agreement. At the thought of Su Zimo's current unknown status of life and death, Elder Lu could not help but feel guilt rise within him and sighed deeply. Forget it, let's head back, the disheveled old man gestured with his hand looking all worn out. Even though neither of the 3 perfected golden cores said anything, all of them had the same thoughts that Su Zimo must have perished so quickly within Great Rock Forest that he did not even have the time to send the spirit crane for reinforcements. In truth, none of them had seen the way Su Zimo dueled with the crane on the cliff to join the sect. If they had witnessed that, they would understand that Su Zimo wasn't going to die that easily. Su Zimo did not obtain any insights through the spirit tiger and leopard for 2 days. Feeling frustrated and remembering that he had yet to hand in his mission for the gold ores, he left his cave abode and headed for the mission Stele on his flying sword. There were quite a number of disciples from Weapon Peak gathered around the Stele, with Shui being one of them. Su Zimo walked over and asked, Elder Lu's not back yet? Yes, he's been away for 2 days now and hasn't returned yet, Shui nodded. Then what are you guys looking at? Su Zimo saw that there were many disciples gathered around the mission Stele discussing amongst themselves. Shui pointed to the Stele. Take a look at that first mission. Su Zimo raised his head. 5 Peaks mission, search for the mysterious burly man. Beside the mission was a drawing of the appearance Su Zimo had changed into previously. What's this all about? Su Zimo asked, pretending to be none the wiser. Shui whispered, I heard that some disciples of Spirit Peak were attacked near Great Rock Forest by this mysterious burly man. He's said to be extremely strong at a cultivation realm of perfected chi condensation. Su Zimo snickered internally. Even if they were to deploy the entire sect, they wouldn't be able to find this mysterious burly man. Swish. Suddenly, the sound of robes slicing the air could be heard. Everyone turned over to see the disheveled old man and Elder Lu speeding through the air and landing on the peak. Both of them swept through everyone with a casual gaze before stopping at Su Zimo fixedly. Their gaze seemed as though they wanted to eat him up. You came back from Great Rock Forest alive, lad? The disheveled old man grit his teeth and asked, saying each word with a punch. He was pissed. They had spent tireless nights searching for Su Zimo in Great Rock Forest, worried and upset. Yet, unknowingly, the lad had already returned unharmed. Elder Lu was even more pissed. Because of Su Zimo, he was not only scolded badly by the disheveled old man, he was feeling guilty for the past 2 days. But who knew, the lad was well and alive here without the slightest bit of remorse. Su Zimo felt goosebumps rising from their stares as he coughed gently and nodded. Yeah, I returned after completing the mission. Nonsense. The disheveled old man barked, how did we not see you along the way to Great Rock Forest? Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo replied, I'm only at level 5 chi condensation. In order to conserve spirit chi, I spent half of my journey running on the ground instead of traveling with my flying sword. You guys must have missed me. Unless there were obstructions, no one would pay attention to the people walking on the ground. That made sense. Both the disheveled old man and Elder Lu could not admit that they had spent all that time outside searching because they were worried for Su Zimo's safety. It would be embarrassing to admit it. However, that was still a pent-up feeling that they had nowhere to vent. Both those sly old foxes exchanged glances and understood the other's intent without saying anything. We've got to find an excuse to punish this stupid brat. Elder Lu's eyes shone with craftiness as he put on a stern expression. Lad, you haven't completed the mission of Great Rock Forest, right? Do you know that there's a punishment for not completing missions? For both of them, the fact that Su Zimo could return alive from the forest was already a blessing. How could he possibly complete the mission? Besides, both of them had been to Great Rock Forest before and knew that a gold eater was guarding it. Also, the pure gold mine was already looted clean. However, Su Zimo chuckled. Out of sheer luck, I've managed to complete the mission and not let you guys down. Ah. This time round, both of them were the stumped ones. Before they even realized what was going on, Su Zimo had retrieved a lump of pure gold ores from his storage bag, which was enough to form a small mountain slightly taller than a man. The disheveled old man and Elder Lu were not the only stumped ones, all the disciples around froze as well. One had to understand that a single small piece of pure gold ore was sufficient to complete the mission. However, Su Zimo had brought back a huge lump of it. A huge lump. What everyone did not know was that the lump they were witnessing was merely a third of what was within Su Zimo's storage bag. Furthermore, he was hiding the precious pure gold crystal as well. Somewhat stumped, both old men were speechless for a moment. After a while, Elder Lu gulped and coughed gently. Lad, the mission is, pretty well done. Cough, cough. Elder Lu wanted to nitpick at Su Zimo, but he truly found himself incapable of doing so at the sight of the huge lump of gold ores. The disheveled old man furrowed his brows and asked, Lad, did you see the gold eater beside the gold mine? Yeah. Su Zimo nodded. When I arrived there, I found the gold eater killed already. Since there were still quite a number of gold ores left, I brought them all back. What the fuck? Both old men rebutted internally, that lad's luck is way too bloody good, isn't it? Chapter 85, Sound of Tigers and Leopards. Chapter 85, Sound of Tigers and Leopards. Su Zimo handed in the mission and received quite a number of contribution points for it. He then returned to his cave abode. Watching Su Zimo leave, both old men could not help but lament in deep thoughts. There's no wonder why he's the man who could cultivate a level 3 spirit fire. Even his luck is beyond others. The disheveled old man pouted his lips. Yes. Elder Lu continued, those trial disciples of Spirit Peak that went to Great Rock Forest were not low in cultivation realms, but yet they were injured badly. But this lad? Not only did he not bump into that mysterious burly man, he even managed to go through Great Rock Forest entirely while returning peacefully with all those pure gold ores with just a level 5 chi condensation. What else do you call that if not luck? The disheveled old man remarked in pity, actually, given his gift for refining weapons, it'll be best for him to join True Fire sect. Our sect isn't good at weapon and elixir refinement at all. I honestly feel a little bad that we may end up burdening his progress. Let's not think so much. He's only just started on weapon refinement and can't even create an inferior grade spirit weapon. Even though our sect doesn't specialize in weapon refinement, we have the foundation of it too. Let's think about other stuff in the future, Elder Lu consoled. Nodding, the disheveled old man lowered his head in deep thoughts. It was still early when Su Zimo returned to his cave abode. According to his plan, he would spend all his efforts on immortality cultivation during the day, be it for raising his cultivation or learning more about weapon refinement. Come nighttime, he would cultivate the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Before attaining a core, be it chi refinement warriors or foundation establishment cultivators, they were no different from mere mortals and would still have to rest through sleeping. The common ground between chi refinement warriors, foundation establishment cultivators and mere mortals was still their lifespans. Chi refinement warriors and foundation establishment cultivators merely had a slightly longer lifespan than mere mortals who could only live to 100+ at best without ailments or accidents. However, demonic cultivation was different. During daytime, most demons would be in hiding and would only roam and hunt for food at night when their energy peaked. In fact, Su Zimo would also be resting come nightfall. However, through the 2 years of demonic cultivation, he already had the habit of maintaining the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness's breathing and expiration method even in his sleep. That way, Su Zimo's demonic cultivation was rising equally without taking up any of his immortality cultivation time. It was just that the lack of progress in the marrow cleansing section had caused a bottleneck for his demonic cultivation path. For the next few days, Su Zimo continued forcing the 2 spirit beasts to cry out continuously. After those few days, the 2 spirit beasts were so exhausted that their voices were hoarse. However, Su Zimo still had no clue on how to proceed with the marrow cleansing section. Even if they were spirit demons, they would be worn out howling like idiots without sleep or food for a couple of days. The spirit tiger and leopard looked absolutely lethargic as they sprawled on the ground sleepily. Sigh, I've never met a master so hard to please. The spirit tiger sighed. If he wanted to kill or chop us up, at least that'd be a swift ending. But what's the point of torturing us like this? The few days of struggle had Su Zimo tuckered out as well. He wasn't idling while the 2 spirit beasts were howling, he listened intently with all his attention, afraid that he might miss the secret in a lapse. However, the end result was merely complete exhaustion as his eyelids were so heavy that he wanted nothing more than to have a good sleep. Forget it, I'll kill these 2 tomorrow for food. Lying down on his stone bed, that thought jolted through his mind as he fell into slumber. He was simply way too tired. The moment he closed his eyes, he entered dreamland and his breathing turned heavier, using the breathing expiration method of the body tempering, tendons transformation and body tempering section subconsciously. The 2 spirit beasts exchanged glances as though they were relieved of a burden. That human finally decided to stop. The spirit tiger was so touched that 2 warm streams of tears flowed down his cheeks as he almost howled out to the skies. If they were to continue pushing on, he would have committed suicide by banging his head against the wall before Su Zimo even killed him. Even though the spirit leopard was exhausted as well, a fierce look rose in its eyes at the sight of Su Zimo sleeping. It was a good chance. Even though both spirit beasts were mentally exhausted, they still had their physical strength. If they could bite through this human's throat, they could escape from this place. Looking at the spirit tiger, the spirit leopard growled softly. The language between demons was naturally understood by the spirit tiger. Even though the spirit leopard's suggestion was rather tempting, the spirit tiger did not want to take the risk. Who knew if this human was pretending to be asleep? Furthermore, the only thought on the spirit tiger's mind was to have a good night's sleep. Swaying its head, the spirit tiger sprawled on the ground and slept. The spirit leopard looked apprehensive. After a moment, as though it had decided on something, its eyes gave off a feral look. Tiptoeing, it kept its killing intent and crept beside Su Zimo. Looking at Su Zimo's pale, succulent neck, the spirit leopard opened its mouth slowly. It was certain that its bite would be able to crush even rocks. All of a sudden, as though it had realized something, the feral look in the spirit leopard's eyes disappeared and was replaced with fear. Its open jaws closed back slowly, as though it had just yawned instead. Turning around, the spirit leopard's eyes were filled with horror as it shivered terribly. Sprawling down on the ground, it turned to look at the sleeping Su Zimo quiveringly, not daring to attempt anything anymore. He's awake. Those were the 2 words in the spirit leopard's mind. As it was about to chomp down, it realized that unknowingly, the human's breathing methods had changed. That change caused the spirit leopard to break out in sweat. It no longer dared to try anything funny as it laid there obediently, falling asleep after wild thoughts ran through its mind. In truth, Su Zimo had woken up the moment the killing intent in the spirit leopard rose. That was because Su Zimo's spirit perception was way too frighteningly keen, the cicada senses autumn coming before the wind even starts to blow. Even back in the Tsang Lang mountain range, the spirit monkey could barely sneak an attack in, let alone this spirit leopard. Since he was going to kill the two spirit beasts the next day anyways, Su Zimo couldn't be bothered to make a move and continued sleeping. Come midnight, Su Zimo and the two spirit beasts were fast asleep. As the spirit tiger slept, a weird noise came from its nose. Huff, huff, huff. After the spirit leopard fell asleep, a sound came from its nose as well, different from the spirit tiger's. Mm, mm, mm. Both sounds were unique and were neither loud nor soft. Superposing, they reverberated through the cave abode. Right then, a mysterious change happened in Su Zimo's body. It was as though both sounds carried a strange energy that could penetrate through the flesh and tendons, permeating to the bones and moving the marrow within. Gurgle, gurgle. Through the vibrations of the two sounds, a rumble like the sound of running water rang out from his marrow, soothing to one's ears. Su Zimo, who was in deep sleep, felt as though he had just been in a dream as he witnessed the marrow liquid within his bones flowing and gushing, squeezing through it, forming blood that seeped into his blood and veins. He bolted wide awake in shock with widened eyes, the sound of tigers and leopards. Chapter 86, Power of Blood. Chapter 86, Power of Blood. Su Zimo laid on the stone bed motionlessly and listened intently to the weird sound that was reverberating through his cave abode. Feeling the sensation of the flow in his marrow, a series of realizations came through to him like seeds germinating. This was the reason why the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness was getting more difficult to cultivate. It was a process of internalizing external qualities. The skin was the first to be tempered, followed by the flesh, tendons, bones. After that sequence, the marrow would be refined. That was the marrow cleansing section. External cultivation techniques were relatively easier to master. That was because apart from sutra, breathing and expiration methods as foundation, there were other killing techniques used to refine one's skin, flesh, tendons and bones. Take the tri-bovine style for example. Continuous cultivation of it would result in refinement of the skin, while the 3 styles of the divine steed would help to refine the bones. However, from the marrow cleansing section onwards, the mystic classic no longer had any killing techniques. Everything would have to depend on Su Zimo's power of understanding to grasp the profoundness of the sutra. It wasn't because the mystic classic was incomplete. Rather, it was because one would not be able to achieve cleansing of their marrow through the mere use of physical techniques. The marrow was located within the bones. External techniques were able to refine one's bones at best and could not reach deeper. That was why another method was required to make use of other forms of energy to refine the marrow. And that energy was none other than the sound of tigers and leopards. Actually, Su Zimo was no stranger to such sounds. Back in Pingyang town, Su Xiaoning had once raised a kitten. The kitten was expressionless and would never speak. However, a rumbling sound could be heard from within its body every now and then, similar to this sound of tigers and leopards. But of course, be it spirit tigers or leopards, neither of them had the knowledge of the marrow cleansing section sutra, and hence, their marrows would never ever be stronger than Su Zimo's. The sound of tigers and leopards was merely a turning point of the marrow cleansing section. The true profoundness of it laid within the sutra. Su Zimo recalled the sutra of the marrow cleansing section and started imitating the sound of tigers and leopards. Huff, huff, mm. Through repeated imitations and attempts, Su Zimo's body started giving off a unique vibrating sound too. The reverberation of the sound caused his marrow liquid within his bones to flow, churning at a rapid speed while producing blood that seeped into Su Zimo's blood and veins. The true meaning of marrow cleansing was to swap blood. Through vibration of the marrow, new blood that was stronger than Su Zimo's existing blood would be formed. According to the marrow cleansing section, an initial success would be enough to kill off an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. At phenomenal success, one could kill off mid-stage foundation establishment cultivators with ease and could even match against late-stage foundation establishment cultivators. That was how frightening the blood swapping of marrow cleansing was. Be it tempering of the body, tendons or bones, those were external strengths at the end of the day. From the marrow cleansing section on, Su Zimo would be cultivating a strength that comes from within, the power of blood. Back in the Tsang Lang mountain range when he was being hunted by the Foundation establishment cultivators of Joyful Clan, he had only managed to escape at the brink of death with the Sanguine Ape transformation. The reason why the Sanguine Ape transformation was able to receive such a tremendous amount of power within a short period of time was due to the power of blood. That was also why Su Zimo turned weaker after the Sanguine Ape transformation. He had yet to start on the marrow cleansing section back then and his body could not bear the immense burden at that time. From now on, the same situation would not happen again. After the marrow cleansing section, the Sanguine Ape transformation would no longer be of any use to Su Zimo. After all, with just an initial success of the marrow cleansing section, every channel of his blood would send forth a horrifying amount of power. In the blink of an eye, the night had passed. He had already gotten a rough grasp of the sound of tigers and leopards. Standing up, Su Zimo's heart was filled with joy and his previous disappointment had cleared completely. He had finally made progress on the marrow cleansing section after being stuck for so long. Looking at the spirit tiger and leopard, Su Zimo smiled. The thought of killing them had disappeared too. No matter what, both beasts had credit for his newfound understanding of the marrow cleansing section. The two beasts had woken up long ago as well. When they saw Su Zimo smile, a shiver ran down their spines as they shuddered. Neither of them had seen Su Zimo smile before. But, now all of a sudden, he was smiling. It's over, it's over. That human is going to lay his hands on me now. The spirit tiger cried internally. For the spirit leopard, it was more of guilt. It had nearly died on the spot for its killing intent the previous night. Right now, its head was lowered, not daring to look at Su Zimo. Su Zimo walked forth, whisking the spirit tiger in his left arm and spirit leopard on his right before leaving his cave abode and heading to the front peak. Crossing the thick fog, he arrived before the sect and placed the two spirit beasts down. You guys can leave. Spirit tiger. Spirit leopard. Both beasts were stunned and did not realize what was going on. He was letting them off just like that. Even after a while, both beasts laid sprawled on the ground, obediently still like little kittens. Su Zimo smiled and waved his hand. Go on and leave. You're not allowed to harm others from now on. This time round, the beasts could tell of the casualness in Su Zimo's tone. The human seemed as though he was truly sincere about letting them go. The spirit leopard got up slowly and moved a little. Upon seeing no reaction from Su Zimo, it headed into the distance. After taking a couple of steps, the spirit leopard turned around hurriedly and was only relieved after seeing that Su Zimo had not caught up to it. Even so, the spirit leopard did not dare to run and merely trod further away in small steps, turning back from time to time. The spirit tiger did not move and watched Su Zimo with slightly agape jaws. Su Zimo asked, "Why aren't you leaving?" The spirit tiger grinned widely in a seducing manner and even wagged its tail. The moment it did that, the spirit tiger's heart skipped a beat as it scolded itself internally, bloody hell. I'm the king of the forest. Why am I wagging my tail like a dog? If you're not leaving, I am. With that, Su Zimo turned towards the fog. Hesitating for a moment, the spirit tiger chased after him. Looking at the spirit tiger behind him, Su Zimo smiled. Why? You want to follow me? It nodded its head hurriedly. The spirit tiger lamented internally, what kind of a joke is this? This human is so perverted, asking me to cry out repeatedly. How would he let us go so easily? It's a trap. He's laying a trap. If we really run, he'll definitely kill us. The spirit tiger turned and looked at the spirit leopard that was walking away warily and mourned in his heart. Brother leopard, good luck. You're probably about to die. There's no way Su Zimo knew what the spirit tiger was thinking, but since it was so resolute, he brought it with him through the fog formation. Along the way, the spirit tiger waited for Su Zimo to turn back and kill the spirit leopard. However, even by the time they crossed the fog formation, Su Zimo did not seem as though he had the intention of turning back. It was then that the spirit tiger realized that Su Zimo had actually meant to let them off. Fuck my life. The spirit tiger cursed internally as he grit his teeth. Wait, so I was the one who dug a pit and jumped into it myself? I even covered myself in it. There's still a chance. Another chance. The spirit tiger encouraged itself, ready to run away the moment the opportunity arises. Right then, a perfected golden core streaked through the air. When he caught sight of Su Zimo below, he murmured a soft surprise and changed direction, descending before the man and beast duo. Chapter 87, Crisis. Chapter 87, Crisis. Greetings, Master. The person who had arrived was Weapon Peak's master, the disheveled old man. Su Zimo bowed and greeted. Nodding slightly, the disheveled old man's gaze turned towards the spirit tiger behind Su Zimo and frowned. Right now, the spirit tiger was in internal turmoil. It was actually looking for an opportunity to run away, but an old man popped out of nowhere, and by the sound of it, he was the perverted human's master. Didn't that mean that he was even more perverted? This pit is getting deeper by the moment. I'm screwed. Furrowing his brows, the disheveled old man asked, "Is this your spirit beast?" In the cultivation world, there were many cultivators who kept spirit beasts, and in a duel, these beasts played a part in their total fighting strength. Hesitating slightly, Su Zimo nodded. The disheveled old man looked at the spirit tiger and remarked gruffly, "This spirit tiger has quite an ordinary endowment and there's nothing special about it. But since you chose it, you'll have to make a blood oath with it." Su Zimo remained silent. The disheveled old man continued, "Lad, remember. You must be wary of anyone that isn't of our race. Furthermore, humans and demons take on different paths and it's hard to change a beast's nature. Cultivators have naturally weak bodies. If they were to be betrayed out of the blue by a spirit beast that's constantly around them, it's easy for them to die to it. In the cultivation world, cultivators would always make a blood oath with spirit beasts to prevent any betrayals. With a blood oath, the spirit beasts would die on the spot through a reflux of their own blood if they had any thoughts of betrayal. The rise in strength for a cultivator with a strong, variant bloodline or ancient beast was always obvious. But of course, the difference between both sides must not be overly huge while making the blood oath, and neither must the spirit beast resist or it will fail. That was why for some super large sects, they would provide various larvae or eggs of spirit beasts if they were grooming some paragon cultivators. While the spirit beasts were cubs and foolish, the chances of creating a blood oath with them would improve tremendously. Su Zimo had heard Ji Yaoshua mentioning blood oaths before, but he was rather resistant towards the idea of it. It wasn't just because of Dai Yu or the fact that he was doing demonic cultivation as well. It was more of the fact that he did not like to be enslaved, and neither did he want to do it to others. That was equivalent to taking away the freedom of one's life. It was even more cruel than killing them. More than that, Su Zimo was willing to get along with spirit beasts in other manners, like the way he did with the spirit monkey. He believed that even without a blood oath, the spirit monkey would not harm him. The disheveled old man thought that Su Zimo's silence was due to the latter not knowing how to make a blood oath. Chuckling, he pulled out a blank piece of paper from his storage bag and scribbled a couple of incantations on it before handing it to Su Zimo. "Here, learn it. Take it as my gift to you as your master." Incantations like the blood oath require contribution points to exchange for within the sect. The disheveled old man's act was equivalent to giving a benefit to Su Zimo in secret. Receiving the paper, Su Zimo nodded in thanks. "All right, head back then and make a blood oath with this spirit tiger soon. Head to the old man guard and get a spirit beast badge from him too. Don't drag too long," the disheveled old man instructed before soaring into the skies and speeding out of the sect. Within Ethereal's sect, even spirit beasts of cultivators had a badge for recognition and free entry and exit of the fog formation. Watching everything unfold before his eyes, the spirit tiger's blood curdled as it cried internally. It's really over now. I can't run anymore. Once the blood oath is made, I'll be his tiger from now on. Su Zimo summoned his flying sword and the spirit tiger joined him. Before long, they arrived at his cave abode on Weapon Peak. Through the journey, Su Zimo was silent and expressionless. Arriving at his cave abode, Su Zimo gave a casual rub and the paper that contained the blood oath turned into dust, scattering through the air. When the spirit tiger saw that, its jaw dropped slightly apart in shock. It had been watching Su Zimo through the entire journey. The latter had not taken a look at the blood oath at all. Now that he destroyed the paper, did that imply that he already knew the blood oath? Su Zimo turned around and looked at the spirit tiger indifferently. I'm not going to make a blood oath with you. If you choose to follow me, nod your head. If not, you can leave now. The spirit tiger was stunned. A choice. This human could have made a blood oath without it daring to resist at all. Yet, the human had chosen to give it a choice. That gave the spirit tiger an unprecedented sense of respect and trust. Ow! Ow! Suddenly, blood rushed into the spirit tiger's head as its mind went blank, causing it to nod furiously like a chicken pecking for rice on the ground. Su Zimo chuckled. Alright, since you chose to follow me, you can't betray me. Of course, I'll treat you the same way. Unknown to the man and beast, a pair of eyes were concealed within the depths of the clouds above them, watching everything that transpired between them as well as listening in on their conversation. Su Zimo entered his cave abode with the spirit tiger tagging along. Clouds rumbled as a gigantic pair of wings flapped, covering the skies as it flew towards Ethereal Peak. When it returned to this cave abode that now felt familiar after multiple days of torture, the spirit tiger calmed down and was troubled. Bloody hell, what happened to me just now? How did I agree to it so rashly? That guy was clearly just trying to bribe me. Sigh, how illogical. The spirit tiger regretted its decision. However, since it had made a promise, it felt bad to renege on it in the blink of an eye. As long as he doesn't do that to me, I can accept even those random cries every now and then. Alright. I'll just stay here on that condition for now then. Since we didn't make a blood oath, I'm free to come and go. At that thought, the spirit tiger felt no burden and stayed in Su Zimo's cave abode for the time being. An additional spirit beast did not affect Su Zimo's life much. The spirit tiger would head out to look for food every now and then, even bringing some back for Su Zimo. Because Su Zimo had demonic cultivation, he required sustenance through meat as well. The spirit tiger's actions saved him trouble and helped to conserve the essence of his scarlet flame fruit as well. Su Zimo spent the following period of time cultivating the marrow cleansing section while raising his cultivation realm and improving on weapon refinement. After the disheveled old man's hint, Su Zimo went to look for him at the weapon refinement hall for all doubts and view projections left behind by seniors in the sect at the same time. In this period of time, Su Zimo made tons of improvement for the first 4 steps of weapon refinement. However, the most crucial step was the 5th one, spirit gathering. For that, he was still stuck and had no success in creating inferior-grade spirit weapons yet. Instead, his storage bag was now filled with a whole bunch of pseudo-spirit flying swords. The disheveled old man had once said that weapon refinement masters would develop a unique sense of spirit perception after a long time of refining weapons, and that would help with spirit gathering. For advanced weapon refinement masters, the chances of them gathering a single spirit pattern to create an inferior-grade spirit weapon was close to 100%. Su Zimo had spirit perception as well, but it was different from the one weapon refinement masters had. He had tried to make use of his own spirit perception for spirit gathering but to no avail. During that period of time, there was another month-end test on Weapon Peak. Once again, Feng Haoyu came to Weapon Peak and even sent Chi refinement warriors to Su Zimo's cave abode, challenging the latter. However, Su Zimo refused to see them. The reason why he had taken part in the previous test was because he wanted to observe the projections. But, now that he could view them at any time he wanted, there was no need to waste time on the test. he couldn't care less about Feng Haoyu's challenge. What Su Zimo did not realize was that his rejection of the challenge would indirectly lead to the greatest crisis in the history of Ethereal Peak. Chapter 88, Challenge Between Two Peaks. Chapter 88, Challenge Between Two Peaks. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had joined the sect for more than 2 months. It was already mid of the year by now. This day, Su Zimo was pondering about the technique of spirit gathering in his cave abode when the spirit tiger's sharp ears heard the sound of sword kinesis flight speeding towards their direction. Before long, his door sounded with hurried knocks. "Bro, open up. Are you there?" Little Fatty's voice rang out. Su Zimo sighed. He was about to make headway when his thought process was broken. Getting off his stone bed, he walked out of his cave abode with the spirit tiger behind him. Because the spirit tiger was even taller than the little fatty and it looked feral, the latter was so scared that he almost fled from the spot on his flying sword. It was only after he saw the spirit beast badge on the spirit tiger's neck that little fatty calmed down and chuckled. "Bro, you're amazing. You even have a spirit beast now. What happened? What are you so flustered for?" Su Zimo saw that little fatty's nose was filled with beads of sweat as though he had rushed over because something had happened. Slapping his forehead, little fatty replied hurriedly, "Bro, it's bad. Weapon Peak's disciples are fighting with Spirit Peak disciples in our Peak's spirit arena." Su Zimo frowned. "Explain everything clearly. What's going on?" "It's like this." Little Fatty organized his thoughts and related the entire event thoroughly. Su Zimo's eyes turned colder by the moment. So, he was the cause of the conflict between disciples of both peaks. During this period of time, Su Zimo was always in his cave abode and had rarely appeared. Not only did he not take part in the month-end test, he did not even reply to Feng Haoyu's challenge. However, that made Feng Haoyu feel as though he was being looked down on. It was an absolute disgrace for him. Naturally, disciples of Spirit Peak began to mock that Su Zimo was a coward who did not dare to accept the challenge and whatnot. When disciples of Weapon Peak heard it, they naturally felt uncomfortable as well, and because of that, both sides had been engaging in a verbal war for the past period of time. Everything escalated to this day when the fight exploded, causing disciples of both peaks to engage in a challenge. To be honest, other than Su Zimo, none of the Weapon Peak disciples had a heaven spirit root and neither were they well versed in fighting techniques. Most of the Weapon Peak disciples spent their time raising their cultivation states and refining weapons. Even for Chi refinement warriors at the same cultivation realm, Weapon Peak disciples were far inferior compared to Spirit Peak disciples. In fact, even those that were merely a level higher may lose as well. This was a challenge that Weapon Peak could not win. Without saying anything more, Su Zimo summoned his flying sword and said grimly, "Go to Spirit Peak." The spirit tiger leapt on the sword as well. As Su Zimo's spirit beast, it naturally had to follow suit. During this period of time, Su Zimo's had gotten to level 6 Chi condensation. At full speed, his sword kinesis flight was almost comparable to Little Fatty, who was level 7 Chi condensation. One had to understand that Little Fatty had a heaven spirit root as well. However, the fact that they had a similar speed implied that Su Zimo's quality of spirit chi was even higher than Little Fatty's. This doesn't make sense. Little Fatty was puzzled. "Bro, don't be rash later on." They were about to arrive at Spirit Peak, and when Little Fatty saw the coldness in Su Zimo's eyes, he reminded out of fear that the latter might do anything inappropriate. Su Zimo did not reply. Cultivators were not allowed to fight one another casually within Ethereal Peak. If they had any grudges to settle, they would have to do it in the spirit arena. Each peak had their own spirit arenas located in the westward direction respectively. After all, the westward represented the metal element, it was assigned to kill. However, even in the spirit arenas, cultivators were not allowed to kill or cripple the other party's cultivation. It was only a place to determine the winner. But of course, duels, especially between cultivators who were evenly matched, were usually decided through a single crucial moment. It was difficult for anyone to properly hold back their power for those critical moments, and the accidents have happened in the spirit arenas before as well. Before long, Su Zimo and Little Fatty arrived above Spirit Peak. At the westward direction, a large group of people gathered with many disciples looking on. Su Zimo and Little Fatty descended outside the spirit arena. Make way, make way. With his fat body, Little Fatty paved a path forcefully. Many Spirit Peak disciples were just about to scold him when they caught sight of the spirit tiger behind Su Zimo and got jolted in shock, swallowing their words. In front of Su Zimo, the spirit tiger was tame as a kitten, but out here, it was ferocious and mighty, even letting out a feral roar every now and then. Soon, they arrived at the front of the crowd. There were at least 2,000 trial disciples looking on around the spirit arena. It wasn't just Spirit and Weapon Peak, disciples of the other 3 peaks had arrived upon hearing the news as well. The stir caused by this challenge had rattled all 5 peaks. Those that stood at the front of the crowd were naturally the prodigies and talents of every sect. Leng Ro with the ice spirit root was amongst them as well, watching on with her usual coldness. In the spirit arena, a level 8 Qi refinement warrior of Spirit Peak was engaged in battle against Shui Yi. Shui Yi was at level 9 Qi condensation, a realm higher than this person. However, he was being suppressed to a big disadvantage, and it was only a matter of time before he lost. A fight between Qi refinement warriors was limited where items such as spirit weapons and talismans were not used. Even though they were both riding a single flying sword, the level 8 Qi refinement warrior of Spirit Peak clearly had a much better mastery with it, as his flying sword pressured Shui Yi endlessly. Shui Yi's mastery of his flying sword was clearly much clumsier. That's Sun Tao, a heaven spirit root. He's nothing much in Spirit Peak and only listens to Feng Haoyu. Humph, bro. Even though I'm only level 7 Qi condensation, I might even be able to take down this man too, Little Fatty whispered at the side. Su Zimo nodded his head and looked around, spotting the haughty, purple-robed Feng Haoyu standing nearby. Right then, Feng Haoyu turned to look at Su Zimo too. A taunting look flickered through Feng Haoyu's eyes. Fufu, you're finally willing to show yourself? Feng Haoyu scoffed coldly and suddenly declared loudly, Sun Tao, don't drag this anymore and end it quickly. The genius of Weapon Peak is here to watch. Feng Haoyu placed particular emphasis on the word genius. Right then, countless gazes turned towards Su Zimo. Leng Ro turned slightly and glanced at Su Zimo indifferently before looking back. Despite the intense fight, Sun Tao was still able to afford the distraction of looking out of the spirit arena. After he saw Su Zimo, Sun Tao burst out into laughter and activated some hand seals. His flying sword shone brightly and burst forth with energy, hitting Shui Yi's flying sword away and piercing towards his heart. Shui Yi's eyes were instantly panicked. He wanted to dodge, but at the sight of the incoming flying sword, his body went slightly stiff instead. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes. Just as the flying sword was about to pierce Shui Yi's chest, Sun Tao chuckled and adjusted its trajectory upwards. Poof! The flying sword pierced through Shui Yi's shoulder blade and brought forth a stream of blood. Groaning, Shui Yi was brought to a stagger from the force and fell from the spirit arena. A couple of disciples from Weapon Peak rushed forth to support Shui Yi, applying ointment on the wound to slowly stop the bleeding. The disciples of Weapon Peak watched angrily and shouted as Sun Tao walked slowly off the spirit arena. The winner was already decided, why did you still injure him? Humph, no one is to blame for his lackluster skills. Sun Tao scoffed coldly, Weapon Peak is only good at talking. Level 9 Qi condensation? So, what? Even if you're a realm above me, you're nothing in my eyes. Chapter 89, Sneak Attack. Chapter 89, Sneak Attack. Su Zimo kept silent the entire time, looking frighteningly calm. Standing beside him, Little Fatty naturally could feel the sharp aura that was exuding forth from within Su Zimo. It was horrifying. Bro, if you want to fight, please don't touch them out here. The sect's rule states that cultivators can only spar within the spirit arena. Even though Su Zimo was only at level 6 chi condensation, for some reason, little fatty always felt that he was extremely strong. Terrifyingly strong. Su Zimo headed up and checked out Shui Yi's wound. The sword had pierced his shoulder blade and the wound would take at least a month to recover. Shui Yi's face was pale. When he caught sight of Su Zimo, he forced out a smile. Junior brother Su, you're here too. Su Zimo nodded his head. Senior brother, rest well. I'll make them pay for this. Don't. Shui Yi's expression changed as he tugged at Su Zimo's arm, shaking his head. Junior brother, don't fall into their trap. The reason why they did this was to lure up into the spirit arena so that they can cripple you, rendering you incapable of taking part in the year-end face-off. That's right, junior brother Su. You don't have to bother with our affairs. As long as you win Feng Haoyu in the year-end face-off, that'll be as good as making them pay, the other Weapon Peak disciples chimed in. Su Zimo shook his head. When he saw that, Shui Yi was even more anxious. Junior brother, you've only joined the sect for less than 3 months, so you've probably never been to Spirit Peak to learn battling techniques between cultivators. How are you going to fight them? I'm at level 9 chi condensation and I lost, let alone your level 6. Don't be silly. Even though Shui Yi's words were unkind, he had actually said them out of concern. Humph. Sun Tao, who had exited the spirit arena, passed by Su Zimo and the others. When he heard that, he smirked and raised his brow. If junior brother Su wants to have a fight, we've got other level 6 chi condensation disciples in Spirit Peak. If that doesn't work, how about I get a level 5 to go against you? How's that sound? Haha. A series of laughter burst forth from the crowd. Junior brother Su, I'm only at level 5 chi condensation. I'm willing to spar you in the spirit arena, do you dare to? A disciple from Spirit Peak stood up. Another Spirit Peak disciple yelled, Junior brother Su, we joined the sect at the same time. Even though I'm only at level 4 chi condensation now, I can still be your opponent too. Feng Haoyu looked at Su Zimo and remarked idly, if you're thinking of finding a level 3 chi refinement warrior as an opponent, then I guess that's something Spirit Peak doesn't have. Ha ha ha. The laughter roared even louder. That's too much. The disciples of Weapon Peak were so angry that their faces went green. Little Fatty sighed at the side. Even though he sided with Su Zimo, he was still someone of Spirit Peak at the end of the day and could not say anything at the moment. Shui Yi clutched his wound and said softly, Junior brother Su, let's head back. Don't fall for their trap. I was the cause of this to begin with, so things should end with me. Right after he said that, Su Zimo turned to look at Feng Haoyu before saying slowly, Feng Haoyu, for the sake of that fake title of being top of 3 peaks, you've created so much trouble directly and indirectly. I had initially thought that you would be a somebody, but now. Su Zimo did not continue, merely shaking his head. A gold glare flickered through Feng Haoyu's eyes as he asked icily, what do you mean by that? You've been wanting to challenge me, right? Su Zimo continued, as you wish. Get to the spirit arena then. The voices in the crowd gradually vanished. Everyone looked at Su Zimo in astonishment, unable to believe what they had just heard. Su Zimo wanted to challenge Feng Haoyu. One was at level 6 chi condensation while the other was at level 8. One was a disciple of Weapon Peak, untrained in fighting techniques, while the other was the number 1 genius of Spirit Peak. The difference between the two of them was like heaven and earth. Even little Fatty was stumped as well. While he believed that Su Zimo was strong, it wasn't to the extent of Feng Haoyu's strength. But the sudden challenge declaration to Feng Haoyu sent little Fatty into a fluster. Junior brother Su, don't do that. Shui Yi thought that Su Zimo had issued the challenge because he was young and impetuous. Ha ha ha. After a momentary silence, an even louder roar of laughter burst out from the crowd. Some of the Spirit Peak disciples clutched at their stomachs in laughter. I can't do it. This Su Zimo is way too hilarious. He wants to challenge junior brother Feng. That's what I call overestimating one's strength. Isn't that right? How did he manage to even say it out? That guy is real thick, that's for sure. Feng Haoyu merely smiled and watched Su Zimo silently. He did not have to say anything. By now, Su Zimo was already a laughing stock of the entire place. Sun Tao said with a stifled chuckle nearby, "Are you even fit to challenge junior brother Feng?" Su Zimo eyed him and replied coldly, "Don't worry, once I'm done with him, you'll be next." Roar. Suddenly, the spirit tiger lowered its body and gave off an ear-piercing howl, silencing the clamor of the crowd instantly. Many of the disciples that were onlooking were shocked as well, stumbling back instinctively as a stir broke out through the moving crowd. Scouring around the place, the spirit tiger's aura was ferocious as it looked on with feral eyes and snarling teeth. Some of the female disciples were so rattled that they screamed endlessly. This ended the spirit tiger's previous depression as it gloated internally. The fact that it was subdued by Su Zimo did not mean that it was weak. On the contrary, it was strong. In fact, a high-level Qi refinement warrior might not even win it in a death bout. Most of the Spirit Peak disciples head out often and have been in many battles including against spirit beasts. Right now, they were much more composed as they realized that this was Su Zimo's spirit beast from the badge on its neck. Sun Tao narrowed his gaze and sneakily dodged away from the spirit tiger's line of view. Pulling out a flying sword stealthily, his eyes were filled with malicious intent. Swoosh! The flying sword left his hand and shot out towards the spirit tiger's head. Sun Tao's attack was extremely sneaky without any warning at all. Coupled with the fact that there were more than 2,000 people around, the entire place was noisy with auras mixed together. By the time the spirit tiger noticed, the flying sword was already near to it. It was an extremely vicious move that was aimed on killing it without holding back at all. With its life at stake, the spirit tiger leapt to the side and slanted its head as quickly as possible. Shing! A stream of blood flashed by. A long, bloody wound appeared on the body of the spirit tiger as its skin peeled outwards with blood flowing endlessly. Roar! Crumbling to the ground, the spirit tiger's body shivered repeatedly. It howled out miserably with pain in its eyes. Su Zimo's expression changed as he turned around sharply. Looking at the spirit tiger injured on the ground, his heart was filled with a strong killing intent. The reason why Su Zimo did not realize the danger approaching was because Sun Tao's attack was not aimed for him. By the time he heard the sound of the flying sword, it was too late. Furthermore, Su Zimo's attention was focused on Feng Haoyu with his back facing Sun Tao. He had not expected that someone would ignore the rules of the sect and strike outside of the spirit arena. When he saw Su Zimo's eyes, little Fatty's heart skipped a beat. Shit, something bad is about to happen. Chapter 90, Strike. Chapter 90, Strike. Failed to pierce the spirit tiger's head, Sun Tao's eyes filled with a trace of disappointment as he harumphed coldly, "You got lucky, beast. You are courting death." A demonic red light shimmered through the depths of Su Zimo's eyes as he hollered. Suddenly, he arrived in front of Sun Tao within a single step that crossed 20 feet. That was none other than the plow heaven stride. Even though it looked plain, it was intimidating as Sun Tao was so rattled that blood drained from his face. He suddenly felt as though the being before him was not a human, but an ancient beast. Su Zimo's killing intent was torrential. With a backhand slap, he whipped at Sun Tao's cheek. Bang! Sun Tao could not fight back at all. The last thing he knew was his vision blackening. He was knocked down by Su Zimo. Crashing headfirst, a large pit formed around his head as he fainted on the spot with blood oozing from his eyes, nose, ears and mouth. Above the spirit arena somewhere beyond the clouds where the eyes could not reach, a surprised murmur sounded out. A gigantic pair of wings that was barely visible appeared with a pair of eyes observing everything beneath coldly. Weird. How come that lad's blood has? A barely perceivable mutter could be heard from above the skies. At the spirit arena. The entire series of events caused an uproar. It started with Sun Tao's sneak attack that injured Su Zimo's spirit tiger. That was something that everything could still accept as reality. But what happened next had them all stunned. By the time little Fatty wanted to prevent it, it was already too late. No one had expected that Su Zimo would lay a hand on Sun Tao. Not just that, Sun Tao was knocked out with a single slap and no one knew if he was even alive still. Careless. It must be out of carelessness. That was the first thought across everyone's mind. Sun Tao was a level 8 Qi refinement warrior of Spirit Peak. The only possibility for him to be defeated by a level 6 Qi refinement warrior of Weapon Peak in a single move must be because he was being careless. It's over, it's over. Bro totally ignored the sex rules and laid a hand on a fellow sect mate out of the spirit arena. Now, no one even knows if Sun Tao is still alive. This is bad. Little Fatty scratched his ears and cheeks anxiously, trying to think of a way out of this. Insolent. Audacious. Su Zimo, how dare you break our sect's rules and hurt a fellow sect mate? You're the one courting death. Many disciples of Spirit Peak rushed out from the crowd and surrounded Su Zimo, barking at him angrily with unfriendly looks. Watching everything nearby, Feng Haoyu's eyes filled with a taunting look as he gloated internally. Seems like I don't even have to do it personally anymore. What a witless fool, Fufu. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he looked at the surrounding Spirit Peak disciples coldly. Squatting down, he applied ointment to the Spirit Tiger's wound. The Spirit Tiger endured through the pain and looked at Su Zimo with blinking eyes, feeling a sense of warmness gush through its heart. Leng Ro at the side nodded her head in acknowledgement as she saw that too. Everything aside, the fact that Su Zimo could maintain his composure in front of more than 1,000 Spirit Peak disciples was proof of his mental fortitude. She acknowledged that she wouldn't even be able to match Su Zimo's calmness. Everyone, please don't be rash. Don't get hasty now, guys. Little Fatty hopped out and bowed to everyone, giggling. If you guys make a move, that means that everyone would have broken the sex rules too, right? Upon hearing that, many of the Spirit Peak disciples looked apprehensive as they stood rooted momentarily, feeling embarrassed to strike out. Feng Haoyu's gaze shimmered as he suddenly leaned and whispered to a Spirit Peak disciple beside him. Nodding in acknowledgement, that disciple rode his flying sword and dashed towards Spirit Peak's palace. A look of disgust flickered through Leng Ro's eyes when she saw that. She need not guess further. Feng Haoyu must have asked that person to snitch so that they could get seniors of the sect to deal with Su Zimo. Su Zimo, how dare you hurt our people on our premises? Do you really think Spirit Peak is that weak? Just as both sides were in a stalemate, Feng Haoyu suddenly remarked. When he heard that, little Fatty's heart sank. What a devious man. That statement was clearly meant to stir everyone's emotions so that Su Zimo would end up fighting with the disciples of Spirit Peak. The graver this matter became, the more severe Su Zimo's punishment would be. Indeed, right after Feng Haoyu said that, some of the initially hesitant Spirit Peak disciples looked much more resolute. Placing their hands slowly on their storage bags, they were ready to strike at any moment. Finally, one Spirit Peak disciple could hold it in no longer. Confident of his physical strength because he had cultivated a body-tempering technique in the past, he harumphed coldly and walked forth, reaching for Su Zimo's hair while barking, Su Zimo. We're asking you a question. Don't act mute. Get lost. Without even turning back, Su Zimo flung his arm. Even though it looked flimsy, a loud crack sound akin to that of a whip rang out. Piak. Before that Spirit Peak disciple's palm could even reach Su Zimo, he was sent flying into the crowd by that slap. His teeth cracked as he coughed out blood, knocking out cold on the ground. Everyone was in an uproar. Little Fatty was almost on the brink of tears. He was trying his best to stop the situation from escalating, but now, everything he had done was in vain. Su Zimo's strikes were so swift that no one could react to it at all. Now, he had enraged all of Spirit Peak's disciples. The many Spirit Peak disciples summoned their flying swords which hovered in the air, ready to strike at any moment. Dozens of Weapon Peak disciples surrounded Su Zimo with their flying swords summoned as well. Both sides were pointing swords at one another as war was on the brink of breaking out. Feng Haoyu's eyes gloated even merrier. Don't fight, don't fight. When little Fatty saw that, he was even more troubled as he took out a huge axe from his storage bag. Pulling out a talisman with his left hand, he slapped it on Su Zimo's back. Instantly, a barrier of light appeared around Su Zimo's body. It was a protection talisman. Instead of using it on himself, little Fatty gave it to Su Zimo. That act had Su Zimo feeling extremely touched. What little Fatty did would undoubtedly offend his fellow disciples of Spirit Peak. Damned Fatty! Which side are you on? A Spirit Peak disciple shouted. Suddenly, little Fatty's expression turned grim. His smile disappeared as he hollered, "Fuck you. It's none of your matter whose side I'm on." That shout from little Fatty caused many Spirit Peak disciples to be stumped. Ever since he had joined the sect, no one had seen little Fatty get angry before. He was always smiling and friendly. In fact, he had even more friends than Feng Haoyu. Realizing that he may have acted inappropriately, little Fatty pouted his lips. "I'm a fatty and so be it, but I hate people calling me damned fatty." Suddenly, a shout boomed out from afar. "Everyone, disperse." A beam of light shot over and appeared above everyone's head with an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator standing on his flying sword. Behind him stood the Spirit Peak disciple that snitched. "Greetings, Senior Brother Chen." "Good timing, Senior Brother Chen. Please redress our grievances." Su Zimo of Weapon Peak broke the sect's rules by assaulting fellow sect mates. Many disciples of Spirit Peak cupped their fists and greeted, recognizing the man who had arrived. Little Fatty whispered hurriedly, "Bro, don't offend this person. He's an inner sect disciple of the disciplinary hall, Chin Yu. He must be here to cause trouble for you because he's on friendly terms with Feng Haoyu. Please just bear with it." Pausing for a moment, little Fatty continued, afraid that Su Zimo might not understand the severity of things. "We can't afford to offend inner sect disciples. Otherwise, we'll suffer after we get promoted to the inner sect. Besides, he's someone of the disciplinary hall." Chapter 91, Tit for Tat. Chapter 91, Tit for Tat. It was only normal for someone of the disciplinary hall to come settle things since a disciple had broken the sect's rules. However, if the person that had arrived was on good terms with Feng Haoyu, that meant something. This person did not mean well. Chin Yu's expression was solemn as his gaze swept through the messy crowd. Descending slowly, he surveyed the place and asked sternly, "Who is Su Zimo?" Su Zimo was just done with attending to the spirit tiger's wound and the red gleam in his eyes had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced with a look of hidden uneasiness. He wasn't worried about this disciple of the disciplinary hall, but something else. When he heard Chin Yu's question, Su Zimo patted the spirit tiger's body to comfort it before standing up. Turning around, he replied calmly, "I am. I heard that you've only joined the sect for less than 3 months. Yes. How dare you?" Chin Yu suddenly bellowed out coldly. Su Zimo remained silent. Feng Haoyu's hands were behind his back with his lips slightly curled, looking on with a hint of mockery. The moment Chin Yu arrived, Feng Haoyu knew that Su Zimo's reputation was over. He could not think of a way for Su Zimo to get out of this. A ban from the year-end face-off was probably the lightest of all punishments for breaking sect rules. For worst-case scenarios, Su Zimo could be locked in seclusion indefinitely, have his cultivation crippled or even kicked out of the sect. Chin Yu smirked internally at Su Zimo's silence and declared, "Su Zimo, you've broken our sect rules by hurting your fellow sect mates. In the name of the disciplinary hall, I shall cripple you and kick you out of the sect. The moment he said that, everyone's expressions changed. That punishment was way too severe. Even disciples from Spirit Peak felt that it was a little too cruel as they looked at Su Zimo with pity. Anyone who could join Ethereal's sect were all people who had exceptional endowments and mental fortitudes. Yet, he was going to have his cultivation crippled, turning him into a mere mortal. Not just that, he was even going to be kicked out of the sect. That was a blow that no one would be able to accept. Leng Ro frowned and looked at Su Zimo instinctively. To her surprise, the green-robed man's expression had not changed in the slightest bit. His eyes were indifferent as though he hadn't heard what Qin Yu had said. Is he utterly dejected or scared silly? But Leng Ro wouldn't have imagined in her wildest imaginations that Su Zimo's current calmness was because there was no fear in his heart, as he had already made up his mind. No one will be able to take away his cultivation. If Qin Yu dared lay a hand on him, he would dare to fight back or even kill. And in the worst-case scenario, even if his cultivation was crippled, he could continue with his demonic cultivation. He was not going to let things end so easily today. Little Fatty's expression was worried. After much conflicted thoughts, he could no longer hold it in as he said loudly, "Senior Brother Qin, I think that the punishment is a little too severe. Please show some mercy." "That's right, Senior Brother Qin. Su Zimo has only joined the sect for less than 3 months. It's understandable." "I agree. Similar things have happened in the past, but I've never heard of anyone having their cultivations crippled or kicked out of the sect." Many disciples of Weapon Peak chimed in to speak up for Su Zimo. "Humph." Qin Yu harumphed loudly and shouted, "All of you, shut up. Since you guys are not convinced, I'll explain to you why. Ignoring sect rules and hurting fellow sect mates is something that's subjective. However, this incident nearly escalated to a full-out bout between disciples of Weapon and Spirit Peak. That's unpardonable. If I was slightly later and disciples of both peaks end up fighting with severe injuries, who is going to bear the responsibility?" The way Qin Yu put it made it seem as though the crime was truly heinous. Suddenly, everyone went silent. Right then, Su Zimo spoke. "Based on what you said, I didn't start the incident. Everyone saw that I wasn't the one who started the provocation. Sun Tao was the one who made a move first. If we're talking about who broke sect rules, he did it first." When he heard that, Feng Haoyu shook his head with a taunting look. "Oh?" Qin Yu was expressionless as he asked, "Sun Tao struck at you?" "That's right," Su Zimo nodded. "Bullshit." Qin Yu shouted, "Sun Tao clearly struck your spirit beast. The sect decreed that cultivators are not to strike at one another. However, there's no rules stating that they're not to strike at spirit beasts. So, Sun Tao's actions do not equate to a violation of sect rules." At that moment, some people finally realized why Sun Tao chose to strike at Su Zimo's spirit beast instead of him. It was premeditated. He just probably had not expected to be knocked out by a single slap of Su Zimo. Calmly, Su Zimo replied, "Striking at my spirit beast is the same as striking at me. There's no difference." "Foo-foo." Qin Yu scoffed coldly, "How dare you argue at a time like this? A spirit beast is nothing more than an animal. How dare you break our sect rules to injure fellow sect mates for an animal? That makes you doubly guilty. To me, spirit beasts are no different from people. In fact, some people aren't even comparable to spirit beasts. At least spirit beasts don't create internal strife and plot against you." Su Zimo continued indifferently, "If spirit beasts are no different from animals to you, then some people aren't even comparable to animals to me. If I whack those people, so be it then." When he heard that, Feng Haoyu's expression turned stiff. Those words pierced at his heart like needles. Most people around could tell what Su Zimo meant by those words. Little Fatty and Shui could not help but roar in agreement internally. If it was them, they would not be able to rebut the same way in front of someone from the disciplinary hall. "What a glib tongue you have." Qin Yu's voice was ice cold as a killing intent rose within him. They were surrounded by trial disciples of all 5 peaks. Su Zimo's constant rebuttal caused him to look bad in front of everyone. If he did not exert his authority right now, his image as a disciple of the disciplinary hall was going to suffer in the future. Su Zimo, don't force me to kill you with my own hands. Qin Yu narrowed his gaze, no longer hiding his killing intent. Little Fatty's body shuddered as he tugged at Su Zimo's sleeves, hinting for the latter to not say anything more and let matters get worse. Everyone could tell that if Su Zimo continued, Qin Yu would definitely make a move to kill him right there. Shui Yi looked at Su Zimo nervously, shaking his head fervently. The tension was so high around the spirit arena that the atmosphere felt ice cold. Everything that had happened was beyond everyone's expectations, including Feng Haoyu. No one expected Su Zimo to be this stubborn and unyielding. Lowering his head, Su Zimo placed his palm on the storage bag, and in the blink of an eye, a cold, gleaming saber appeared in his hands. Pust! Everyone gasped. What Su Zimo did was simply way too dangerous. He was going to get himself killed. Before that thought even dispersed from everyone's minds, Su Zimo spoke indifferently. If you dare lay a finger on me, I'll kill you. That was tit for tat. All 2,000-odd disciples of the 5 peaks broke into an uproar. Chapter 92, Hidden Eyes. Chapter 92, Hidden Eyes. Above in the clouds, the Hidden Eyes had not left and was watching everything unfold beneath keenly. When it heard Su Zimo's declaration, an amused look appeared in those eyes. Brave lad indeed. Interesting. At the spirit arena, all the disciples were in shock. They were not even thinking about how a level 6 Qi refinement warrior could go against a disciple of the disciplinary hall. All of their thoughts were on how Su Zimo even had the courage to make such a declaration. There were only 2 possibilities: he was either stupid or insane. Everyone looked at Su Zimo as though they were looking at a dead man. Initially, Qin Yu had only wanted to cripple Su Zimo's cultivation and kick him out of the sect. But now, he could rightfully kill Su Zimo on the spot. Well. Qin Yu's anger turned into laughter as he nodded his head repeatedly, remarking coldly, to think that trial disciples of Weapon Peak have fallen to such a state where they don't even know what's good for them. Since you want to die, I'll grant you your wish. Slapping his storage bag, a flying sword appeared in Qin Yu's palm. Injecting spirit chi to it, the flying sword shone with a bright gleam as 2 bedazzling spirit lights appeared on the sword. It was a middle-grade spirit weapon. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze. Right as he was about to move, an authoritative voice boomed out from the skies. Stop! A shadow appeared and sped over with a frightening speed. Soaring through the skies without the use of any items, it was a perfected golden core. Qin Yu turned his head slightly and frowned. He was not going to have the courage to strike in the presence of a perfected golden core. With a dark expression, Qin Yu glared at Su Zimo and suppressed his killing intent for now. The person who had arrived as in his 50s. Arriving in lightning speed, his white robes fluttered loudly, exuding the aura of an immortal descending upon the world. On the sleeves of the man's white robe was an emblem of a flying sword. It was Spirit Peak's master, Wen Xian. Su Zimo had seen this person before at the top of the front peak when he joined Ethereal Peak. Greetings, Master. The many disciples of Spirit Peak shouted out. Greetings, Peak Master. Disciples of the other 4 peaks bowed and greeted as well. The appearance of Spirit Peak's master naturally meant that there would be no fight. Heaving a sigh of relief, Little Fatty, Shui Yi, and the rest finally looked more relaxed. Spirit Peak's master would be the one to decide how this matter should be resolved. Su Zimo hesitated for a moment before keeping his cold moon saber. Peak Master, Su Zimo. It's fine, I know everything. Qin Yu spoke right away, wanting to explain everything to Wen Xian but was interrupted by the latter's wave of his hand. Standing tall in the air, Wen Xian looked at Su Zimo silently. Even though he looked calm, no one could read his thoughts at all. After a long time, he asked slowly, "Su Zimo, do you acknowledge your wrongdoings?" Hearing that, Little Fatty, Shui and the rest were delighted. That meant that there was a high chance Wen Xian wasn't going to punish Su Zimo as heavily as Qin Yu did. Before the joy could disappear from the eyes of Little Fatty and the rest, Su Zimo's reply caused their expressions to freeze up. A stir broke out amongst the crowd as well. "I'm not in the wrong." Su Zimo raised his head and looked at Wen Xian, replying calmly. If Su Zimo rebutting Qin Yu was understandable, his rebuttal of a peak master was definitely irrational. But in truth, Su Zimo was never a rational man. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stood his ground instead of kneeling back in Pingyang town against perfected Song Lang's oppression. He would not have headed into Yen city's capital alone to kill the king of Yen despite knowing of the dangers. He would not have proceeded resolutely despite knowing that there was a high chance he might die in the hands of Joyful Clan's Foundation establishment cultivators. Right was right and wrong was wrong. Su Zimo was never going to bow down in the face of power. Not too far away, the other 4 peak masters watched the situation develop. There was no way they did not know about such a huge commotion where disciples of 2 peaks challenged one another. When he heard Su Zimo's reply, Array Peak's master sighed gently. Even though that lad's character is stubborn and somewhat unlikable, it's really rare. I do admire him. That's the type of guts and defiance that someone who cultivates should possess. The path of cultivation is one that defies the heavens to begin with. Even though that's true, that lad's cultivation path will definitely be fraught with obstacles. 3 peak masters discussed amongst themselves as the disheveled old man shook his head without saying anything. It wasn't appropriate for them to make an appearance since everything was happening on Spirit Peak. At the Spirit Arena. After hearing Su Zimo's reply, Wen Xian went silent for a moment. "Su Zimo, let me ask you a question." Wen Xian spoke slowly, "Today, you injured Sun Tao because he injured your spirit beast. If he killed your spirit beast, what would you have done?" As though it had realized something, the spirit tiger growled softly. It had an intellect equal to that of a grown man and it could tell that if Su Zimo were to bow down in defeat now, he would be able to get off with a light punishment. Its roar was to hold Su Zimo back. Turning to look at the spirit tiger on the ground, Su Zimo suddenly smiled. He already had an answer for that question. Su Zimo was bent on revenge against perfected Song Lang for killing his steed, Joy Feng. Why would things be different now that this spirit tiger was his spirit beast too? "Of course I'll kill him." "You'd kill your fellow sect mate for a spirit beast?" "Yes." "Give me a reason." "Since the spirit beast chose to follow me, I naturally have to protect it properly too." Roar. Roar. Ignoring its wound, the spirit tiger struggled to stand up and walk to Su Zimo's side, growling in deep pain while rubbing its head against his arm. The spirit tiger had never truly decided that it wanted to follow Su Zimo. Besides, it could leave at any moment without the binding of a blood oath. That was until this moment when it had made up its mind to never leave this person for the rest of its life. Even if they had no blood oath, that would be the case. When the 4 peak masters heard the conversation, all of them frowned. No matter how much of a ruckus Su Zimo caused in the past, they could overlook it because nothing had blown out of proportion. But the fact that he expressed his willingness to kill a fellow sect mate over a spirit beast was a hard pill for them to swallow. Right then, even the perfected golden cores did not realize that in the depths of the clouds, a hidden pair of eyes was still watching everything silently. When it heard Su Zimo's reply, the pair of eyes gave a look of slight surprise before turning into a ruminating admiration. "Master, I think that not only is this man heartless, he's merciless towards our sect mates as well. We're bound to be faced with greater turmoil if he remains in the sect." Finally, Feng Haoyu had spoken up. The meaning of his words was clear: kick Su Zimo out of the sect. Wen Xian was silent. Countless pairs of eyes watched him, awaiting his final decision. Chapter 93, See You in the Spirit Arena. Chapter 93, See You in the Spirit Arena. Suddenly, Wen Xian asked, Su Zimo, as a heaven spirit root, your endowment completely qualifies you for Spirit Peak. But, do you know why you were asked to join Weapon Peak? I don't know, Su Zimo replied. Su Zimo was not the only one, the many disciples around had the same doubts. It was especially so for Little Fatty and the others who had joined the sect at the same time. All of them had witnessed Su Zimo ascending the peak and passing through the 8 distresses formation. It didn't make sense for someone like that to not join Spirit Peak. Your killing intent is too strong and you're too hot-headed. The reason why you were asked to join Weapon Peak and learn about weapon refinement was to train your mind and mow away your rashness. Once you're ready, you can naturally join Spirit Peak thereafter. At that, everyone finally understood. Shaking his head, Wen Xian's eyes were filled with pity as he sighed. But it's a pity that you're still the same despite 3 months of mowing. Everyone could tell of the deep disappointment within Wen Xian's tone. Pausing for a moment, as though he had made a decision, Wen Xian took a deep breath and declared, Su Zimo, trial disciple of Weapon Peak. You have gone against sect rules today and despite nearly causing a huge disaster, you refuse to acknowledge your wrongdoings. As the Peak Master of Spirit Peak, I declare that you're forbidden to take a single step into Spirit Peak from now on. The 2,000-odd disciples from all 5 peaks went absolutely silent. That punishment was way lighter than what Qin Yu proposed of crippling Su Zimo's cultivation and kicking him out of the sect. However, for the trial disciples, a restriction to Spirit Peak merely implied that they wouldn't get to learn the dueling techniques between Qi refinement warriors. It wasn't a huge loss. Little Fatty, Shui Yi, and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. No matter what, being forbidden to enter Spirit Peak was way better than having one's cultivation crippled and kicked out of the sect. Even though Feng Haoyu was expressionless, he was indignant within. He had plotted immensely to create today's situation for the sake of getting Su Zimo kicked out of the sect. But, it was all in vain. Even though that punishment seemed heavy, it would not prevent Su Zimo from taking part in the year-end face-off. To Feng Haoyu, that wasn't good news at all. Qin Yu's face dimmed as well. If not for Wen Xian's appearance, Su Zimo would have been a dead man to him. He was a step too late. If I had known, I should have just killed him instead of wasting time talking. That bloody brat is so insolent. How dare he go against me? At the start, Qin Yu had only appeared as a favor for Feng Haoyu. But now, it was personal. All the disciples looked at Su Zimo, awaiting his response. After a moment, Su Zimo chuckled and replied nonchalantly, I'm willing to accept the punishment, but... Little Fatty and the rest had just felt relieved when their hearts sank once more. Su Zimo changed the topic and cast his gaze at Feng Haoyu, saying in a gradually intense tone, This is not the end of today yet. Feng Haoyu, we both know the reason behind this challenge between disciples of both peaks. Since you want to fight, I'll grant your wish. Feng Haoyu smirked coldly in disdain. Initially, I had only planned on taking part in the year-end face-off for Weapon Peak. But now, I've changed my mind. Su Zimo continued indifferently, listen up. For the year-end face-off, not only would you fail to get top for Weapon Peak, you won't succeed for Elixir Peak as well. Feng Haoyu had boasted previously that he wanted to be the top of Weapon, Elixir and Spirit Peak. But Su Zimo's intent was clear, he was going to stop Feng Haoyu. Only, the moment Su Zimo's declaration was said, a series of scoffs broke out from the crowd. Even though refining weapons and elixirs both require spirit fire, both are completely different things. In the cultivation world, there has never been someone who was both a weapon and elixir refinement master. Furthermore, the amount of time and energy a person had was limited. Spending a portion of it on refining of elixirs or weapons was already the limit, let alone mastering both or even being number 1 in time. By now, there was only half a year left to the year-end face-off. This was definitely not enough time. But of course, it was undeniable that Su Zimo had a level 3 spirit fire. If he were to spend the rest of his next 6 months on refining elixirs and weapons, he would definitely be quite a threat to Feng Haoyu. That's not all. Just as everyone was in deep thoughts, Su Zimo said something which caused a huge uproar. Peak Master has forbidden me from stepping into Spirit Peak so naturally, I can't take part in the Spirit Peak face-off. But, once that is over, whether you're top in Spirit Peak or not, I'll issue you a challenge. See you, in the Spirit Arena. All the 2,000-odd disciples froze dumbfounded. Su Zimo's final statement was beyond their imaginations. The fact that he could cultivate a level 3 spirit fire was something that every one of the 5 peaks knew about. Therefore, it was still understandable for him to want to go against Feng Haoyu in terms of refining elixirs or weapons. But now, he was declaring war against Feng Haoyu as a level 6 Qi refinement warrior? That was insane. If he was going to spend his next 6 months on weapon and elixir refinement, how was he going to have the time to raise his cultivation? And even if Su Zimo could reach perfected Qi condensation, he was not well versed in battles. Without a chance to step into Spirit Peak, how was he going to learn how to fight? How could he stand up against Feng Haoyu? He was just setting himself up to be humiliated. Foo-foo. Right then, Feng Haoyu finally laughed as he nodded. Amazing. Junior brother Su truly has an extraordinary spirit and courage. Since that's the case, I'll definitely accept the challenge at that time. I hope that you'll be able to give me a surprise. Don't worry. Su Zimo chuckled as well. It'll be a surprise for sure. I just don't know if you can still laugh thereafter. Ugh. The various disciples of Weapon Peak sighed grimly. Deep in his thoughts, Little Fatty looked moody as well. Disciples of Talisman, Array and Elixir Peak looked excited, awaiting the show at the end of the year. However, disciples of Spirit Peak were just waiting to see Su Zimo make a fool out of himself. Before long, today's events would spread through Ethereal Peak and even inner sect disciples would get to know about it, piquing their interest to watch. No matter what, with today's incident, the year-end face-off was now different from those in the past, everyone would be awaiting it. Leng Ro's gaze had been fixed on Su Zimo for a long time now. Even though this man seemed refined, every single move, action and sentence he made sparked her curiosity. Cold by nature, she was someone unconcerned about anything other than cultivation. But now, even she was anticipating it internally. She wanted to see what would happen to this green-robed man at the year-end face-off. Was he going to shine brightly or would he turn into a laughingstock? Chapter 94, 3 Major Secret Skills. Chapter 94, 3 Major Secret Skills. Summoning his flying sword, Su Zimo supported the spirit tiger on it carefully before hopping on himself. He nodded to Shui Yi and everyone else. Fellow senior brothers, I'll make a move first. We'll leave as well. The many disciples of Weapon Peak summoned their flying swords and sped off after Su Zimo, leaving Spirit Peak. Little Fatty hesitated for a moment before making up his mind and followed suit. Before long, Su Zimo and the others disappeared from everyone's sights. Disciples of the other 3 peaks gradually dispersed from Spirit Peak as well. It was a momentary still to the current crisis. However, everyone knew that the year-end face-off would definitely create a huge stir. The eventual victor will be decided 6 months later. At the same time, a gigantic pair of wings tore through the skies from the depths of the clouds, flying into Ethereal Palace. If any disciples of the sect saw that, they would have recognized the owner of those wings as the mystical guardian beast, that terrifying crane. The crane's gigantic body landed into Ethereal Palace, but with a spin, it turned into a ravishing middle-aged lady, elegant with a head of red hair. Caw, caw. A cry came from a room as a smaller crane dashed over sadly upon sensing the aura of the red-headed beauty, flapping its wings furiously. That crane was the one who had deterred Su Zimo and the others at the front peak of Ethereal Peak. Shaking her head and smiling, the red-headed beauty looked at the little crane dotingly and asked, "Why? You're sad about being locked up?" Caw. The little crane seemed as though it wanted to explain something. Looking at the pondering little crane, the red-headed beauty spoke gently after a while. Child, I've been worrying about your future because I can't bear to see you being enslaved as someone else's spirit beast and losing your freedom. But I know that this day would come keeping you by my side since I can't protect you for the rest of your life. The little crane did not know why its mother had suddenly turned so moody. Feeling fearful, it ran beside the red-headed beauty hastily. Smiling, the red-headed beauty continued, but I seem to have found someone rather interesting recently. He's quite suitable to be your master and I'm sure that you won't suffer following him. Caw, caw. The little crane called out once more. Rubbing the little crane's head, the red-headed beauty explained, you can't follow me all the time. I'm old now and you've still got a long road ahead. Instantly, the little crane was dejected. After a while, as though it could not repress its curiosity, the little crane asked inquiringly. The red-headed beauty chuckled. You know that man too. You've even fought him on the walls of the peak. Caw, caw. Caw, caw. Stunned for a moment, the little crane turned extremely agitated as it shrieked loudly, looking furious and disdainful. Foo-foo. The red-headed beauty laughed. Yes, he's a little weak now, but you might not be a match for him. Besides, that man, he has some secrets in his body. It's hard to tell how his future will turn out. And of course, the most important thing is that you don't have to make a blood oath to follow him. You'll still retain your freedom. The little crane called out a couple more times, seemingly still disagreeable to the suggestion. The red-headed beauty nodded her head. Of course, it's still your decision and I'll not force you. What I mean is that there's no harm for you to try getting along with him. If you like him, you can stay by his side. If you don't, you can just leave. The little crane cried softly. Yes, of course I won't lock you up anymore as well. You can head out and play from now on as long as you don't get into trouble. Rolling its eyes, the little crane lamented. Humph, humph. I hate that man the most. He caused me to be locked up for so long and Mummy even wants me to follow him. He'd wish. Now that I'm out, I'll definitely find a chance to get revenge. The red-headed beauty could naturally read the little crane's mind through its expressions. However, she merely chuckled and did not expose him. In the skies not far away from Spirit Peak, 4 peak masters were present and Wen Xian joined them now that he was done. Wen Xian, my thanks. I owe you one, the disheveled old man cupped his fists. There was initially no need for a peak master to appear personally to resolve today's incident. The disciplinary hall could have settled it. However, worried that something might happen to Su Zimo, the disheveled old man requested for Wen Xian to settle this personally. Wen Xian waved it off. Let's not stand on courtesy between one another. Pausing for a moment, he continued, actually, I did not intend to forbid Su Zimo from entering Spirit Peak. It's just that the lad was so arrogant to speak of such brazen words. In a fit of anger, I made that decision so that he could suffer some setbacks. No matter what, I'm still thankful for you stepping in. The disheveled old man said, Chi refinement warriors are all around the same, so it doesn't matter whether he learns anything. As long as he enters Foundation Establishment realm and gets promoted as an inner sect disciple, he can learn all the fighting techniques he wants at that time. It's just that, the challenge between him and Feng Haoyu at the end of the year, when Xian paused in his words. The disheveled old man shook his head. As you've said, if he loses, so be it. It'll be good for him to suffer some setbacks. At least, suffering in the sect is better than losing his life out there in the cultivation world. Array Peak's master, Xian Yi, suddenly said, actually, Su Zimo is not entirely to blame for today's incident. That Feng Haoyu is quite a scheming fella, the brown-haired youth, Elixir Peak's master, remarked wistfully. When Xian frowned in displeasure and shook his head. Feng Haoyu is merely competitive, but he isn't bad by nature. The brown-haired youth shrugged his shoulders. Forget it, take it as though I've said nothing. Xian Yi hurriedly changed the topic as the 5 of them conversed idly for a while more before going their separate ways. Su Zimo had just arrived at his cave abode in Weapon Peak when Little Fatty caught up to him. "Bro, hold on," Little Fatty called out. Turning around to see the descending Little Fatty, Su Zimo chuckled. "Thank you for speaking up for me quite a bit today." "That's nothing," Little Fatty waved it off casually. As though he had just recalled something, Su Zimo apologized. "Because of me, you've offended quite a number of people today. I'm afraid things in Spirit Peak might be tougher for you in the future." "Heh. Don't worry about it, bro. Even though I'm only level 7 chi condensation right now, there's still 6 months more to the end of the year. I've got hope to reach perfected chi condensation too. By then, there won't be many people who can match me. If anyone's unhappy with me, they can meet me in the spirit arena." Little Fatty replied in a relaxed manner. When he was done with that, he sighed. "Bro, that final challenge you issued to Feng Haoyu was a little rash." "Oh?" Su Zimo could tell that Little Fatty was hinting something. Little Fatty asked, "Bro, do you know of the 3 major secret skills of Ethereal Sect?" "Nope," Su Zimo shook his head. Little Fatty explained, the reason why Ethereal Sect could become one of the 5 main clans of the Great Zhou dynasty is because they have the legacy of these 3 major secret skills. Even if you're promoted to an inner sect disciple, you can't get to cultivate those skills. Only legacy disciples amongst the inner sect disciples have the possibility of learning them. Chapter 95, Hidden Ailment. Chapter 95, Hidden Ailment. Legacy Disciples? Su Zimo frowned. This was the first time he had heard of that title. Little Fatty nodded his head. Actually, every sect has legacy disciples. They are the prodigies that are highly valued and groomed by the sections. Some sects call them as core disciples. Understanding, Su Zimo asked, "You mean to say that Feng Haoyu is a legacy disciple?" "Not yet." Little Fatty replied, "But he's almost certain to be one once he promotes to become an inner sect disciple. That's because he's already begun to cultivate one of the 3 major secret skills, Ethereal Sword. I heard it was because my master went to persuade the sect master personally." When he heard that, Su Zimo's expression turned grim. The fact that he had the rights to cultivate the 3 major secret skills before becoming a legacy disciple was enough to tell how much the sect valued him. For the secret skill to be deemed as the support of one of the 5 main sects, it was definitely nothing to scoff at. But of course, to Su Zimo, the factor that determined the victor wasn't on Feng Haoyu, but himself. Outside the spirit arena of Spirit Peak, the moment he laid his hands on Sun Tao, he discovered that he had a hidden ailment within his body. If he did not remove this hidden ailment, the fight against Feng Haoyu at the end of the year would not be favorable for him. Little Fatty went silent for a moment before chuckling. "But bro, since you made this choice, I'll still be on your side. It doesn't matter if you're forbidden from Spirit Peak. I'll spar with you from time to time during these 6 months to raise your fighting power and help you familiarize with dual techniques." "Alright," Su Zimo nodded. "It's just that we'll be a little tight on time. After all, you've got to raise your cultivation and learn about refining weapons and elixirs at the same time. No matter what, we'll just do what we can and hope for the best." After Little Fatty left, Su Zimo brought the spirit tiger with him back to the cave abode. Sitting on his stone bed, Su Zimo's eyes no longer concealed his worries. If this was before he had cultivated the marrow cleansing section, Su Zimo was absolutely confident that he would be able to take down Feng Haoyu with just the horrifying might of his physical body and melee strength. But now, there were some logical yet unexpected changes in his body ever since he started cultivating the marrow cleansing section. Marrow cleansing implied the swapping of blood. Even though the new blood was extremely strong, it contained obvious signs of its demonic nature. Back on Spirit Peak, Su Zimo's killing intent rose upon seeing his spirit tiger get injured. Subconsciously, that activated his blood and veins and he felt his body showing signs of demonic conversion. This was a feeling he had experienced back when he activated the Sanguine Ape transformation. Heaving a deep breath of air, Su Zimo channeled his blood, causing a tremendous aura to surge forth from his veins into every part of his body. He could clearly feel his body expanding and strengthening. The expansion was even more obvious than his flesh being filled and his tendons tightening. This was a complete transformation. His clothes were torn apart by his body, turning into shreds. Even though he could not see his own appearance, Su Zimo knew that he definitely did not look like the refined scholar he was right now. At the side, the spirit tiger glared uneasily. It wasn't just because it felt foreign towards Su Zimo's appearance. The aura Su Zimo was emitting was chilling and horrifying. Lowering his head, Su Zimo caught sight of his left hand's fingernails growing out, jade white and sharp as blades. Merely making contact with them gave off the sound of metal clashing. With a single thought, those frightening nails retracted. The spirit tiger was entirely stumped. Su Zimo's palms were no different from its own palms, where it could retract and release its claws at any time. Green veins popped up and lined all over Su Zimo's arms, thick like pythons coiling around in a frightening manner. How could this be the arm of a human? Using spirit chi, Su Zimo conjured a water mirror. Through the shimmering light, he caught sight of a half-human half-demon appearance. With bloodshot eyes, it was like a mix of an ape and human. His arm trembled and the water mirror disappeared. His entire body was almost transformed save for his right hand that retained its appearance. Fair and tender with long nails, it looked like any other human's. His right hand had always been somewhat strange. Su Zimo had started realizing it back when it could create a level 3 spirit fire. However, he did not know the exact reason why. Heaving a deep breath of air, Su Zimo's blood began to calm down as his demonic appearance faded too. This was the consequences of demonic cultivation. The effects were not so obvious in terms of tendons transformation, body tempering and bones strengthening. However, now that he was swapping blood through marrow cleansing, Su Zimo was showing signs of truly turning to a demon. This was not what he wanted. No matter what, he was a human and did not wish to become a true demon. He had yet to cultivate the marrow cleansing to an initial success yet. But once that was done, or if he had achieved phenomenal success, his blood may undergo endless changes and he may never be able to revert to his current appearance. He could almost imagine the consequences of him failing to control himself earlier on at spirit peak and revealing his demonic state. First, he might be killed on the spot. Second, he might be forced into a blood oath to become someone's spirit beast. If Su Zimo had revealed his demonic appearance, no one would take him as a human. The only way demons could survive in the cultivation world was by becoming the spirit beasts of cultivators. It was either that or he would have to leave the sect and live within mountains and forests from now on, mixing around with true spirit beasts while cutting off all ties with his family and kin. That was something Su Zimo could not do. Yet, he was not willing to give up on demonic cultivation as well. What should I do? He was lost. Naturally, the greatest challenge to Su Zimo right now was the fight against Feng Haoyu at the end of the year. Right now, he had no way of controlling his blood, and if his blood churned while he engaged in melee combat, he was definitely going to reveal his demonic nature. By then, many seniors of the sect in the audience would take him down before Feng Haoyu could. If he wanted to win Feng Haoyu, he could only rely on immortality cultivation methods, making use of fighting techniques between Chi refinement warriors. However, he was almost blank in that department since he had never practiced for it. There were still 6 months till the end of the year face-off. Raising his cultivation, refining elixirs and weapons while mastering sword-wielding and fighting techniques between Chi refinement warriors. Su Zimo made up his mind to pause on the marrow cleansing section. It wasn't just because he did not have time. More than that, he did not dare to carry on. At least, the only thing he could do was to stop his demonic cultivation before he found a way to stop his hidden ailment. Retrieving the weapon tripod from his storage bag, Su Zimo began to work on the step of spirit gathering. He had a hunch that he would be able to figure out the technique to spirit gathering soon. That was the most important step in weapon refinement. Chapter 96, The Spirit Gathering Method That Will Change the World. Chapter 96, The Spirit Gathering Method That Will Change the World. Weapon refinement masters had spirit perception, a sense gained over a long period of time through countless weapon refinements, and was extremely precious. There was naturally no way Su Zimo could have attained it, having only started on weapon refinement for less than 3 months. However, he had a spirit perception as well. His was a sharp sense towards danger. Was it possible to use his spirit perception towards spirit gathering? Gathering a scarlet level 3 spirit fire in his right palm, Su Zimo warmed the tripod. After a moment, he dug out a pure gold ore from his storage bag and placed it into the weapon tripod along with other materials and began smelting. Under the high heat of a level 3 spirit fire, the materials in the weapon tripod turned to liquid state extremely quickly and began to bubble. Spirit chi seeped out from the materials, swirling thickly within the weapon tripod. The impurities within the materials were being purged as well as they condensed. Before long, smelting was over. Extinguishing his spirit fire, Su Zimo rested while waiting for the temperature inside the tripod to lower for forging. A while later, he suddenly stood up and created a pair of spirit hands, reaching into the weapon tripod to create. Before long, the shape of a flying sword appeared in the weapon tripod. Fourth step, tempering. The level 3 spirit fire made its appearance once more, heating the flying sword to a scarlet state as Su Zimo hammered within. He had spent more than 3 months familiarizing himself with the first 4 steps of weapon refinement. By now, he was so well versed that every single step was fluid like water without any delays. Within 15 minutes, the tempering was over. He was at the most crucial step once again, spirit gathering. Heaving out a breath of air, Su Zimo frowned. He had failed countless times at this step and had destroyed many flying swords. How could he solve this issue? Spirit perception, danger, spirit gathering, failure, flying swords destroyed. All of those terms and countless images flashed through his mind. All of a sudden, his eyes twinkled with a bright light. He had just thought of an idea. Su Zimo's heart palpitated uncontrollably as his eyes could not conceal his joy of excitement. That idea could eliminate the problem of spirit gathering, and in fact, he might even attain a 100% success rate through it. Even advanced weapon refinement masters who could create superior grade spirit weapons would not dare to claim a 100% success rate for creating inferior grade spirit weapons. They would only dare to claim they had a high probability of success. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo suddenly kept away the weapon tripod. In theory, spirit gathering should be conducted within the weapon tripod. The reason for that was because no one could guarantee the success rate of spirit gathering. If they failed, the flying sword would explode on the spot and the shards would cause huge damage all around. The more spirit patterns gathered, the more destructive the impact of the explosion should the spirit gathering fail. In fact, it might even endanger the weapon refinement master's life. If it was done inside the weapon tripod, the shards of the broken flying sword would merely strike at the walls of the weapon tripod and the weapon refinement master would not be injured. Now that Su Zimo had removed the weapon tripod, he was exposing himself completely to the potential danger. This was a way too dangerous move. If any seniors of the sect saw this, they would definitely try to stop Su Zimo. However, the gleam in Su Zimo's eyes was only getting more intense by the moment. He was going to expose himself to as much danger as possible. That way, his spirit perception would unleash its full potential. Su Zimo manipulated the thick spirit chi in the surroundings and channeled it towards the flying sword. All of a sudden, a sense of danger rang in his mind. Instantly, he stopped his spirit pattern creation. The sword was unchanged and undamaged. Su Zimo heaved out a sigh of relief. If he had continued earlier, the flying sword would have exploded on the spot. His spirit perception had informed him of the danger beforehand. The cicada senses autumn coming before the wind even starts to blow. Adjusting himself, Su Zimo channeled the spirit chi towards the sword once more. Another warning. Stopping his motions, he continued to adjust without any hurry. For the following period of time, Su Zimo continued to test the waters with spirit gathering, abandoning each time he sensed danger. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, an hour had passed. Finally, the spirit pattern on the sword was clear, but Su Zimo had not sensed any danger. The spirit pattern was being etched in. Buzz. With a slight quiver, the sword gave off a clean, ringing sound that reverberated through the cave abode. Success. A clear spirit pattern could be seen gathering on the sword, shimmering brightly. Even though it was only an inferior-grade spirit weapon, he had created it personally. A never-before sense of pride rose in Su Zimo's heart as he looked at the flying sword hovering not too far away. Weapon refinement masters were in danger of exploding flying swords from failed spirit gatherings. However, with his spirit perception, Su Zimo could sense that danger beforehand. That was akin to a premonition of a failed spirit gathering attempt, so that he could abandon it and readjust for a new attempt. This method of spirit gathering was something never seen before, and it was difficult to replicate as well. It was a spirit gathering method unique only to Su Zimo. At that moment, Su Zimo did not know it yet. However, his act of removing the weapon tripod was something that would have a huge impact in the future of weapon refinement, where countless weapon refinement masters would attempt to imitate. As the scarlet sword gathered its spirit pattern, the surrounding spirit chi was sufficient for a second pattern. A bold thought crossed Su Zimo's mind. Since he could have a 100% success rate with this spirit gathering method, he could attempt for 2 spirit patterns to create a middle-grade flying sword. Composing himself, Su Zimo continued to heat up the flying sword that was gleaming red. Swoosh! The spirit chi surged and gathered towards the sword. No! A warning rang out inside his mind as he stopped it right away. It was another arduous cycle of failing and attempting. In the blink of an eye, 4 hours had passed and he had not succeeded yet. Each attempt brought forth a warning to him. By now, the spirit chi within Su Zimo was almost spent and he was worn out mentally as well. He could no longer hold on. Seems like I thought too lightly of weapon refinement, Su Zimo shook his head. Right after he created the inferior-grade spirit weapon, he had a momentary hallucination that he would be able to craft a supreme-grade spirit weapon of his own before long. Now, he knew that it was way too idealistic of a naive thought. But no matter what, creating an inferior-grade spirit weapon was no longer an issue for Su Zimo. Furthermore, he had even created a spirit-gathering method that was unique to himself. If he made good use of it, the day would definitely come where he could create a supreme-grade spirit weapon. Heaving a sigh of relief, Su Zimo dipped the scarlet flying sword into cold water for the final step, quenching. Shing! The moment the flying sword met with the cold water, white steam billowed out as the energy created through the mix of heat and coldness solidified the sword and spirit pattern. Looking at the unusually sharp flying sword shimmering in his palm, Su Zimo let out a grin. Chapter 97, Elixir Refinement Beginner. Chapter 97, Elixir Refinement Beginner. For the next few days, Su Zimo was in no rush to leave his cave abode. Instead, he chose to remain in seclusion to practice his self-invented spirit-gathering method. As he had expected, he was truly able to achieve a 100% success rate for spirit gathering after removing the weapon tripod. The pity was that he could only create a single spirit pattern each time. He had yet to succeed on a second spirit pattern. Initially, Su Zimo thought that the materials used were the cause for it. However, he still could not create any results even after using the pure gold crystal. Puzzled, he decided to stop his efforts on weapon refinement for the time being. His victory at the year-end weapon peak face-off was assured with a 100% success rate of creating inferior-grade spirit weapons. He had 6 months left and he still had to raise his cultivation, learn fighting techniques and elixir refinement. Towards refining elixirs, Su Zimo had zero knowledge. However, he had no intention of boasting about his current feats. The fact that he was able to create an inferior-grade spirit weapon after just 3 months into weapon refinement was something that would shock the world. Furthermore, Su Zimo's intention was to defeat Feng Haoyu completely during the year-end face-off. If news of his feat was spread now, there was a chance that Feng Haoyu could avoid the challenge. This day, Su Zimo headed out of his cave abode and flew towards Elixir Peak on his flying sword. He intended to spend his time on learning the craft of refining elixirs. Because the 5 peaks weren't really far apart, it did not take long before Su Zimo arrived on Elixir Peak. Every afternoon, inner sect disciples that were elixir refinement masters would head forth to explain more about the craft of refining elixirs, and disciples of all 5 peaks were welcome to learn. Elixir and Weapon Peak were similar in strength, both were the 2 weakest peaks in Ethereal Peak. However, there were slightly more disciples in Elixir Peak than Weapon Peak. The reason was simple: an elixir refinement master could create elixirs for himself, which was a huge booster for raising one's cultivation. However, weapon refinement masters could only create spirit weapons. Even though they boosted one's fighting strength, it was of no use to one's cultivation. There were many cultivators who were talented in weapon refinement but failed to form a core. Because of that, they still died of old age with a lifespan of 100 years. Most importantly, refinement of elixirs was comparatively simpler than weapons because it did not require the step of spirit gathering. Spirit gathering was something so difficult that through the history of time, there were no weapon refinement masters who would dare proclaim a 100% success rate. Su Zimo was the only one. Su Zimo's arrival at Elixir Peak attracted quite a bit of attention. After the events of the Spirit Arena, there were now extremely few trial disciples of the 5 peaks who did not recognize him. The feud between him and Feng Haoyu was something everyone knew about. Of course, the disciples of Elixir Peak were unsurprised at Su Zimo's appearance on Elixir Peak too. Afternoon. An inner sect elixir refinement master standing at the front of Elixir Peak Square gestured with their hands, and the crowd gradually went silent. Fellow sect mates, there's a few things to know before you start on elixir refinement. The inner sect elixir refinement master said slowly, there are 9 grades of elixirs. Typically, a grade 1 elixir is suitable for Qi refinement warriors. Grade 2, foundation establishment cultivators. Grade 3, perfected golden cores. If a Qi refinement warrior were to consume a grade 3 elixir, not only would it not benefit them at all, they might even die on the spot. Su Zimo nodded in agreement. The logic behind it was simple: it was the same as when he had devoured the scarlet flame fruit. If one's body was unable to endure the overwhelming energy, they would just rupture and die. Anyone who can create a grade 1 elixir is an elementary elixir refinement master. Grade 2, intermediate elixir refinement master. Grade 3, advanced elixir refinement master. My name is Bo Shuezhen and I'm an intermediate elixir refinement master. The many disciples below looked at him in awe. Have you guys heard of the saying that every medicine contains 30% poison? Bo Shuezhen continued, it is the same for elixirs in the cultivation world as well. However, the poison now refers to the impurities contained in the elixirs. The less the impurities, the better the quality of the elixir. If an elixir could contain at least 89% impurities, it would truly be a poisoned elixir for cultivators. The crowd chuckled. Senior Brother Bo, how do we differentiate between the qualities of elixirs? A disciple from Array Peak who had just started on learning about elixirs as well asked. Bo Shuezhen's gaze paused momentarily on Su Zimo before chuckling. I see that we have disciples from Weapon Peak around as well. Actually, the difference in quality for elixirs is the same as spirit weapons, both have obvious patterns. The only difference is that they are called spirit patterns in weapon refinement, whereas for elixir refinement, they are called elixir patterns. There are 5 different tiers of qualities for every grade of elixirs. The lowest quality would show a single line of elixir pattern. Of course, an elixir refinement master would not have to gather the pattern personally. That is merely a representation of the amount of impurities within. An inferior grade elixir would have a single elixir pattern with an impurity content of 40%. A middle grade elixir would contain 2 elixir patterns at 30% impurity. Following that logic, a superior grade has 3 patterns and supreme grade has 4. If one could create an elixir with 5 patterns, it would be 100% pure, and that's called a perfect elixir. The mention of that had Su Zimo's heart skipping a beat. If it was as Bo Shuezhen had mentioned, and the same theory applied to spirit weapons, since a supreme-grade spirit weapon had 4 spirit patterns. Could there be an even stronger perfect spirit weapon with 5 spirit patterns gathered? In theory, Su Zimo was right, perfect spirit weapons did exist. The reason why no weapon refinement masters in the sect had mentioned it was because spirit gathering was way too difficult. Notwithstanding 5 spirit patterns, one could even count with their fingers the number of weapon refinement masters who could create supreme-grade spirit weapons in the whole great Zhou dynasty. If one were to say that spirit perception was a sense gained through experience, one would have to require immense luck to gather 5 spirit patterns and create a perfect spirit weapon. Luck, affinity, status, providence, environment, harmony, situation, mental state, a perfect blend of a myriad of factors were required for the possibility of creating a perfect spirit weapon. And that was with the prerequisite that the weapon refinement master himself was at the paragon of weapon refinement. Bo Shuezhen's voice rang out once more. There are 6 steps for elixir refinement as well. The first step is material selection, which involves the choosing of spirit herbs and elixir recipes. Every elixir requires a different recipe. Within the sect, you can exchange for recipes using contribution points. Outside, you'll have to purchase them with spirit stones. Naturally, the rarer the recipe, the more expensive they will cost. Even grade 1 elixirs have different types and functions. There's the essence nourishing elixir, which is used for stabilizing one's foundation and nourishing their essence, and there's also spirit regeneration elixir, which is used for recovering spirit chi. Something like the spirit gathering elixir is the most commonly available elixir, which can help cultivators gather spirit chi better. Those elixirs are easier to refine at the same time. Of the grade 1 elixirs, the foundation establishment elixir is the most difficult to refine, requiring the most complex ingredients. As the name implies, the foundation establishment elixir can help perfected chi refinement warriors with breaking through the barrier to foundation establishment. The gap in cultivation between chi condensation and foundation establishment was a huge one. If one had the help of a foundation establishment elixir, things would be much easier. Su Zimo listened intently. Even after Bo Shuezhen left, he sat on the spot for a long time, making sure he remembered everything he had learned thoroughly before standing up. Arriving at the elixir chamber, he used his contribution points to exchange for an elixir furnace and a recipe for the spirit gathering elixir before returning to his cave abode. Chapter 98, Something Weird. Chapter 98, Something Weird. Back in his cave abode, Su Zimo was in no hurry to start with elixir refinement. Instead, he continued pondering over everything he had learned today and took mental notes of his doubts. Thereafter, he memorized the recipe of the spirit gathering elixir by heart, and just like that, an entire day had passed. Night descended. According to his previous plan, Su Zimo should be lying on the stone bed right now, cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. However, because he could no longer cultivate the marrow cleansing section, Su Zimo could only go to sleep while following the breathing expiration technique of the first 3 sections: body tempering, tendons transformation, and bones strengthening. Thankfully, he had only just learned the marrow cleansing section, and it was not a habit for him yet. The second day, he got up bright and early and began on his chi condensation. Retrieving a spirit stone from his storage bag, he gripped it in his palm and started to raise his cultivation. After level 5 chi condensation, Su Zimo could sense a clear decline in his cultivation speed. If he were to merely absorb spirit chi making use of the spirit stone, he would most likely only reach level 8 chi condensation at best by the end of the year. After all, he had to spend a huge chunk of his time on elixir refinement as well as fighting techniques too. In the blink of an eye, it was already noon. Su Zimo left his cave abode once more and headed to Elixir Peak on his flying sword. To his surprise, the person explaining things today was Elixir Peak's master, a brown-haired youth. Compared to Bo Shuezhen, the brown-haired youth's knowledge of elixir refinement was way deeper. As he explained, the brown-haired youth's gaze would linger from time to time towards Su Zimo for some reason. After an hour of listening, Su Zimo felt his understanding of elixir refinement deepening with many of his previous doubts clarified. After the talk, just as Su Zimo was about to leave, the brown-haired youth called him back, beckoning with his hands. Su Zimo went over hurriedly. "How was it? Could you understand?" The brown-haired youth asked, smiling with a warm attitude. Even though Elixir Peak's master looked to be a youth, his tone was no different from that of an elderly person. One could tell that he had reverted to his youthful appearance. "Yes, it's not bad," Su Zimo nodded his head. "Do you have any doubts?" Su Zimo pondered for a moment before asking, "I heard Senior Brother Bo mention previously that every medicine contains 30% poison. Except for perfect elixirs, every other elixir contains impurities. Would that affect the cultivation of cultivators who consume them?" An approving look flickered through the brown-haired youth's eyes as he nodded. "There is a reason why we set 40% impurities as the minimum value for inferior-grade elixirs in the world of elixir refinement. This is a conclusion made by seniors before us through history and experience. Therefore, any elixirs that have a grade, even inferior grade, are harmless to cultivators." With a slight pause, the brown-haired youth continued, "However, seniors have mentioned the impact on one's cultivation should they consume too many elixirs such that the impurities become sediment in the body and are unable to be purged. Regarding that, there are many different theories to it in the cultivation world, but no one has yet to discover the specific impacts that would be caused." Su Zimo nodded. The brown-haired youth patted Su Zimo on the shoulders. "Go back and practice. Elixir refinement is much easier than weapon refinement and you'll get better with practice. With a level 3 spirit fire as foundation, you can definitely do it. If you have any doubts in the future, feel free to come look for me at any time." Suddenly, Su Zimo realized. He might have been the reason why the brown-haired youth was conducting the session today. Touched, Su Zimo nodded his head. The brown-haired youth passed Su Zimo a storage bag. "There's quite a bit of spirit herbs in here. This should suffice your practice needs. Keep it." Hesitating for a moment, Su Zimo took over the storage bag and bowed deeply. Back to his cave abode. Su Zimo retrieved his elixir furnace and prepared himself for his first elixir refinement. Before him, 4 sets of ingredients were laid out neatly according to their types. Su Zimo had already memorized the recipe as well. The first step of choosing materials was completed. Second step, extraction. As the name implies, this step requires the use of spirit fire to purge away the impurities within the spirit herbs so as to extract its essence. Unlike weapon refinement, the level of spirit fire did not determine the outcome of extraction for elixir refinement. Spirit herbs had a high spirit content and was less rigid, requiring the continuous heating of a strong fire. Most spirit herbs are fragile and the temperature they can endure is different too. If the temperature was too high, the spirit herbs would turn into ashes and one would have to conduct a new extraction. If it was too low, the desired outcome of extraction would not be met. That was the reason why elixir refinement masters had to practice continuously so that they understood the temperature requirements of different spirit herbs. Heaving a deep breath of air, Su Zimo took up a spirit herb and started the extraction process. Swoosh! The moment his flames were ignited, the spirit herb turned into ashes. Watching at the sides, the spirit tiger snickered in a mocking manner. Su Zimo glared at the spirit tiger and regained his composure, taking up another stalk of spirit herb for a new attempt. Failure. Again. Another failure, another attempt. Su Zimo's gaze was resolute and firm as he attempted repeatedly, adjusting the temperature time and again. Finally, under the heat of the flames, the stalk of spirit herb turned into essence in powder form. Placing the tuft of powder into a corner of the elixir furnace, Su Zimo continued with the extraction of another spirit herb. It was another round of failures until he finally managed to place another tuft of powder into the elixir furnace, separate from the first tuft. After a full 4 hours, Su Zimo's forehead was filled with sweat and his spirit chi was almost exhausted. Finally, he had managed to extract the essence of 4 stalks of spirit herbs, placing them in 4 corners of the elixir furnace. Heaving a sigh of relief, he sat down in a lotus position and started recovering his spirit chi unhurriedly. After a while, Su Zimo got up and started with the third step of elixir refinement, synthesis. This step required the mixing of the powdered essence in a specified ratio and order. It was a relatively simple step since the ratio and order were documented in the recipe. However, a single margin of error would affect the content of the produced elixir, and in worst-case scenarios, it would be a failed refinement. After synthesis was the fourth step, secondary extraction. This was the most critical extraction. A failure in this step would result in a waste of all previous efforts. The fusion of 4 different spirit herb essences would result in a structural change such that high heat could be endured. This was the time where a furious flame was required. This was also where the advantage of having a level 3 spirit fire comes in. Whether or not an elixir could be formed with a grade would depend on the amount of impurities that could be purged with this step. The Scarlet level 3 spirit fire heated up the elixir furnace repeatedly, turning the powdered essence into liquid form. The 9 holes of the elixir furnace began to seep with white smoke as a fragrant medicinal smell wafted out. If the level of spirit fire was too low for this step, black smoke might be emitted instead along with a pungent smell. After a moment, the secondary extraction was completed. Fifth step, formation. This was a step that required absolute focus, and the slightest bit of distraction could result in a failure of elixir formation. Su Zimo took in a deep breath of air and composed himself before dividing the essence within the elixir furnace into 9 portions. Fusing together, they gradually took shape and solidified towards a pill form. Right then, something weird happened. Chapter 99, Attack of the Stupid Bird. Chapter 99, Attack of the Stupid Bird. Boom! An ear-piercing boom sounded out as the main entrance to the cave abode was slammed wide open. Instantly, both doors dropped to the ground heavily, creating a dust cloud. One must not be disturbed during the process of pill formation. Caught unaware, Su Zimo was totally shocked as he saw the pills that were about to be formed explode on the spot. His efforts had gone to waste. Not only that, because Su Zimo was still stunned, his mouth was slightly agape and he ended up eating a mouthful of dust. He was finally about to bear fruits for the elixir refinement he had spent an entire afternoon on, only to see it go up in smoke. Right then, Su Zimo even had thoughts of killing someone. Unable to control his blood in a fit of anger, he transformed to his demonic form. Caw, caw. At that moment, a familiar, mocking cry rang out in front of his cave abode. Turning around, he caught sight of a crane standing at the entrance of his cave abode, flapping its wings excitedly and looking gleeful. Phoo! Su Zimo was about to cuss when he realized his mouth was filled with dust and coughed furiously. Caw, caw. When it saw that, the crane was even more amused. If it could laugh, it would have done so long ago. This was the crane that had fought against Su Zimo on the front peak when he was about to join the sect. Su Zimo recognized it right away. Of all times, this stupid bird chose to arrive at this critical juncture. Su Zimo was so pissed off that his curled fists were crackling and his eyes were bloodshot. Roar! The spirit tiger leaped up and roared towards Little Crane with widened eyes. Glancing at the spirit tiger, Little Crane's eyes were filled with disdain. Initially, the spirit tiger was rather wary about making the first move against Little Crane that was a spirit demon. However, that look of contempt triggered the spirit tiger instantly. I can't take that lying down. I've got my pride. With a feral roar, it rushed up with fire flaring out of its eyes. Bang! The spirit tiger was sent rolling back even faster and more ferocious than it was when it had pounced ahead. The moment it leapt ahead, Little Crane flapped its wings and knocked it back. Rolling a few times on the ground, the spirit tiger ate a mouthful of dust as well, looking wretched beyond anything else. Flipping up, the spirit tiger spat out its mouthful of dust and hollered, ready to strike once more. Come back! Su Zimo called softly. Without any hesitation, the spirit tiger retreated as though it was waiting for Su Zimo's command from the get-go. At the end of the day, the spirit tiger was only a spirit beast and wasn't a match for that stupid bird. Alright, since you destroyed a batch of my elixirs today, let's use that to write off our feud. From now on, don't come look for me and I won't offend you too. How's that sound? Su Zimo decided to negotiate with the stupid bird since their feud wasn't deep to begin with. If he did not resolve this issue, he was not going to have a peaceful life in the future as well. Notwithstanding elixir refinement, Su Zimo wouldn't be able to handle it even if the stupid bird came every once in a while during his cultivation. Caw, caw. Little crane raised its head in disdain. Su Zimo frowned. The stupid bird did not seem as though it wanted to let things end here. On account that your elder is the mystical guardian beast of the sect, I don't wish to hurt you. You should not continue to bother me, Su Zimo said slowly with a stern and blackened expression. Caw, caw. Caw, caw. Little crane continued to cry out with a taunting look. Without saying anything more, Su Zimo patted his storage bag as a blood-red bow appeared in his hands. Arrow, load and strung bow like a full moon. The entire process was fluid like water as though he had practiced it countless times. Swoosh. The sound of an arrow tearing through the air rang out as a black light streaked past Little Crane, missing it by an inch. The speed of the arrow was so fast that Little Crane jumped in shock, totally caught unprepared. Su Zimo declared coldly, that arrow was just a warning shot. If you continue to bother me, I'll kill you with my next arrow. Naturally, there was no way Su Zimo would dare to kill that stupid bird unless he was tired of living. That was merely a threat. Furthermore, this stupid bird was still in its infancy stage and was merely being playful. It did not deserve death just for that. Caw, caw. Upon hearing Su Zimo's declaration, Little Crane was enraged as it flapped its wings. Glaring at Su Zimo sharply, it wanted to engage him in a bout. In a swift motion, Su Zimo dashed out of the cave abode. This time round, Little Crane was prepared as it flew into the skies instantly. Circling around the skies, its talons shimmered dangerously, looking as though it could swoop at any moment. Su Zimo arched his bow once more. Swoosh. 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 He fired 3 arrows with all his might. Little Crane dodged everything in midair with nimble ease. Caw, caw. It cried out loudly, laughing at Su Zimo's archery skills. Su Zimo was starting to regret things now. Had he known that this would be the case, he would have pierced the stupid bird's wings with his first arrow while it was unguarded. But now, things were awkward for him. Even if he could use his flying sword, he would never be as agile in midair as a spirit crane with wings. He wouldn't be able to unleash his fighting prowess completely. Furthermore, Su Zimo did not dare to engage the spirit crane in melee combat right now. If he lost control of his blood and showed signs of his demonic self, the consequences would be dire. However, if he wanted to make use of his flying sword, he was only at level 6 chi condensation. He might not be able to hurt the crane even if it stood still for him. There was no way for him to fight. After standing at the entrance for a while, Su Zimo realized that there was nothing he could do to the stupid bird and decided to return to his cave abode. The moment he sat down, Little Crane appeared before the cave abode and started yelping before he could even take a single breath. That stupid bird. In a fit of anger, Su Zimo rushed out once more. Again, Little Crane flew away. The moment Su Zimo returned to his cave abode, Little Crane returned. It refused to enter his cave abode and instead stood at the entrance taunting him while crying from time to time. Suddenly, Su Zimo had a bad feeling. If this stupid bird were to continue with this, notwithstanding elixir refinement and raising of his cultivation, even a good night's rest would be a pipe dream. True enough. Su Zimo had just fixed the door to his cave abode when Little Crane broke it once more. Little Crane stood outside with Su Zimo remaining inside. The man, Crane and a spirit tiger spent their day looking at one another without doing anything. To that, Little Crane found extreme joy. The man and the tiger suffered immensely. For the next few days, Little Crane would visit Su Zimo's cave abode from time to time, crying loudly outside. At times, the man and tiger would catch a breather once Little Crane left. But, the moment they tried to catch up on sleep, Little Crane would return. Not only was Su Zimo unable to cultivate or refine elixirs, even sleeping was a tall task for him. It has been a few days since the man and tiger have slept. Both Su Zimo and the spirit tiger had lost quite a bit of weight. The spirit tiger was on the brink of tears. Previously, it was tormented by Su Zimo for some unknown reason in this cave abode, ordered to roar continuously. Now, a stupid bird had appeared out of nowhere to torment them. By now, the spirit tiger was suffering from mental trauma. It was even contemplating if it should leave Su Zimo for the time being so that it could escape to the forest for a good night's sleep. Chapter 100, Delving into Formations. Chapter 100, Delving into Formations. This morning, Su Zimo sported 2 black eye circles, looking worn out and fatigued with bloodshot eyes. He was in the same state as the spirit tiger. Under the torment of Little Crane, it was yet another sleepless night for the man and tiger pair. Suddenly, Su Zimo spoke, "This can't go on. We've got to think of something." The spirit tiger was listless and shrugged its head drowsily. Counting on the spirit tiger to suppress Little Crane was way too unrealistic. It had a normal bloodline and it was a long way before advancing to become a spirit demon. Even if it could turn into a spirit demon, it had no way of flying and would only be led by the nose by Little Crane. Su Zimo's current methods were not enough to suppress Little Crane as well. Neither the man nor Crane could injure the other, but Su Zimo could not afford this waste of time. He had considered asking seniors of the sect for help as well. However, given the Crane status, it wasn't a guarantee that he would receive any help. Furthermore, Su Zimo had his ego as well. Was he going to be defeated by a stupid bird? After a long silence, he looked at the nearby spirit tiger and said sternly, "I'll go out for a while. Don't follow me. As long as I'm not here, the stupid bird won't bother you." The moment the spirit tiger heard that, it was invigorated and so touched that tears nearly streamed down its cheeks. If Su Zimo had not left, the spirit tiger was prepared to head out to tide through this predicament as well. Patting the spirit tiger on the head, Su Zimo left the cave abode and summoned his flying sword, speeding towards Array Peak. After much thought, he concluded that only an array formation could suppress the stupid bird. If he could set up a large array formation in front of his cave abode similar to the fog that was protecting the sect, he would be able to get rid of the stupid bird once and for all. Su Zimo had zero knowledge about formations and he had to learn from scratch. However, it was better than wasting his time in the cave abode accomplishing nothing at all. Before long, he arrived at Array Peak. It was early morning at that time and there weren't many disciples on Array Peak. Most of them were cultivating in their cave abodes. The Array Peak Square would only be filled with more trial disciples come afternoon when it was time for inner sect array formation masters to share their experience. Similar to talismans and elixirs, formations are divided into 9 grades. Elementary array formation masters are able to lay out and dispel most grade 1 formations. Grade 2 formations, intermediate array formation masters. Grade 3 formations, advanced array formation masters. There were many types of formations but generally, they could be divided into 4 types: killing, trapping, illusionary and buffing formations. The 8 Distresses formation was a type of illusionary formation, whereas the fog formation protecting the sect was a combination of a trap on top of an illusionary formation. In layman terms, the principle behind forming a formation was to make use of different obscure formation patterns while gathering spirit chi to activate various effects. Unlike the other 4 peaks, Array Peak had a symbolic structure. On the west of Array Peak was their spirit arena and beside it stood the 10 formations pagoda. There were 10 floors to the pagoda containing a different formation on every level. Each time a cultivator entered, they would fall into a formation and they could only ascend to the 2nd floor if they managed to dispel it. Following that logic, only cultivators who passed through the first 5 formations were qualified to be called elementary array formation masters. Su Zimo's arrival did not cause much of a stir. However, many array peak disciples were surprised. There were only 6 months left to the year-end face-off. Everyone knew that Su Zimo had to work on elixir and weapon refinement alongside preparing for a duel against Feng Haoyu. There was no time at all. Most disciples present at Array Peak thought that Su Zimo's appearance to listen in on formations was because the latter had chosen to give up on his duel against Feng Haoyu and scoffed it off. However, none of them knew that Su Zimo was here because he had no choice. He naturally hoped that he could spend all his effort on refinement of elixirs, raising his cultivation and working on fighting techniques. However, the appearance of that stupid bird had ruined all his plans. From that day on, Su Zimo stayed in Array Peak temporarily. Of course, there was no way Array Peak would provide Su Zimo with a cave abode. He spent his days in the Array Chamber, rarely appearing and delving into books to learn of the various formations. Starting with the most elementary formations, he learned and dug further, exploring and researching. There was naturally no way Little Crane would let Su Zimo off. However, it was embarrassed to create a ruckus inside Array Chamber where Su Zimo was hiding. Instead, it merely gloated internally. "Humph, you can't hide in there forever." Su Zimo spent the next period of time on Array Peak. Not only had he memorized all the Grade 1 formations in Array Chamber, he was now researching on Grade 2 formations. As Little Crane was a spirit demon level beast, Su Zimo had to rely on the power of Grade 2 formations to suppress it. Grade 1 formations could kill, trap or bewitch spirit beasts. However, spirit demons were way stronger and could break through Grade 1 formations with sheer brute force. Su Zimo spent less than a month to memorize and comprehend Grade 1 formations. The reason why he progressed so quickly was because he was putting all of his effort and time into formations. In the cultivation world, there weren't many people who would be this extreme. However, Su Zimo was forced to a corner by Little Crane and could only use every single moment he had on learning about formations. Compared to Grade 1 formations, Grade 2 were much more complex. Su Zimo spent more than 2 months before he memorized and understood most of the Grade 2 formations. 3 months. He had spent a whole 3 months in Array Peak. It was undeniable that Su Zimo was a smart person with a talented endowment. That was something that Dai Yu had discovered when he first cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness. Coupled with the pressure from Little Crane, Su Zimo's wholehearted efforts into learning about formations were rewarded handsomely. There were 2 floors in the Array Chamber and the second floor was filled with Grade 2 formation manuals with almost nobody around. Because Su Zimo had spent his later 2 months on the second floor of Array Chamber, most Array Peak disciples thought that he had left long ago and gradually forgot about him. This morning, Su Zimo came forth from the Array Chamber. The sun was a little piercing to his eyes after such a long time. Standing in front of the Array Chamber, Su Zimo recalled everything he had learned for the past 3 months before heading towards the 10 Formations Pagoda. No matter how much he understood and knew about formations, he had to give it a test. The 10 Formations Pagoda was the perfect test to determine where Su Zimo was after 3 months of formation studies. On the pagoda's left was Array Peak Spirit Arena. On its right, a tall stele etched with dense lines of words was erected. The upper portion displayed names, the middle portion displayed the number of floors cleared and the final portion displayed the time taken. Su Zimo glanced at it casually. Because it was in the morning, there were no other trial disciples near the 10 Formations Pagoda. There was only an elderly person who was sitting upright with a stoic expression on his face, looking hale and hearty with vigor. Chapter 101, Challenging the 10 Formations Pagoda. Chapter 101, Challenging the 10 Formations Pagoda. Senior, I want to challenge the 10 Formations Pagoda. Is there anything to take note of? Su Zimo came to the elder and asked respectfully. Although Su Zimo had stayed at Array Peak for 3 months, this was his first time coming to the 10 Formations Pagoda. The elder paused for a while on Su Zimo's face. He sized him up and asked, "You look very unfamiliar. You're not a disciple of my array peak, are you?" "I'm from Weapon Peak," Su Zimo nodded. "Oh." The elder replied casually. He looked at the sect badge on Su Zimo's waist and passed him a wooden badge, saying in a deep voice, "Take this badge. If you can't hold it or encounter danger inside, break this badge immediately. You will be transported out safely." "There are dangers to be encountered within the 10 Formations Pagoda?" Su Zimo was slightly stunned. The elder explained patiently, "Level 1 of the 10 Formations Pagoda is very simple. As long as you set up a supplementary formation, you can reach level 2. Level 2 is an illusion formation and the type of illusion is random. You will need to dispel the formation to reach level 3. Level 3 is a trap formation. Once you clear the trap formation, you will be able to see the entrance to the level 4, the killing array. It is extremely dangerous inside, and if you aren't careful, you might lose your life. If you can't crack it, don't force yourself. Crush this badge." Level 5 is a combination formation consisting of 2 of either a trap, illusion, or killing formation. You can only be considered as an elementary array formation master after dispelling the formation. With that, you can ascend to level 6. With a rough understanding of the 10 Formations Pagoda now, Su Zimo bowed and expressed his thanks before entering the pagoda. Looking at Su Zimo's back view, the elder smiled and mumbled to himself, "It's rare for disciples of Weapon Peak to come and try to clear the 10 Formations Pagoda. I wonder how many levels that lad can clear. Perhaps 2. Su Zimo. That's quite a familiar name. I seem to have heard it before somewhere." Murmuring softly, the elder shook his head and did not think much about it. After all, there were many disciples challenging the 10 Formations Pagoda on a daily basis, and he only paid attention to some of the more outstanding ones from Array Peak. 10 Formations Pagoda, Level 1. This was a slightly spacious room that was empty. The floor was a little strange, it was soft with some elasticity. Surrounded by 4 walls, the door behind Su Zimo slammed shut the moment he entered, and the entrance to level 2 was not in sight. Su Zimo thought for a moment and understood. The entrance to level 2 would only appear if he laid out a supplementary formation on the ground. He did not hesitate as a stream of spirit chi shot out from his fingertips. Squatting down, he drew on the ground carefully. He was drawing a soundproof formation. Inside, no one could hear any noise made from the outside. This was the first formation that Su Zimo learnt, and his motive was to isolate little cranes chirping. While drawing a formation pattern, one had to focus intently without any distractions or deviations. Even the slightest deviation of the formation pattern would result in a failed formation that could not be activated. This was a test of a cultivator's patience and conscientiousness towards details. The better they were, the more perfect things would be. Array formation masters were all meticulous people. If the setting up of a formation was seen as a game of chess, the array formation master would be the player. A chess game was unpredictable, and a single misstep could lead to a loss. For array formation masters, any mistakes in their spirit patterns would render their previous efforts wasted. The soundproof formation was relatively simple, and its patterns were not complex as well. Before long, Su Zimo had drawn the formation on the ground. A spirit stone was placed in the eye of the formation as it shone brightly on the ground. The soundproof formation was activated. Crack. 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 At the same time, a stone door appeared on a wall in the south, revealing a stone staircase made of granite that led to level 2. The soundproof formation that Su Zimo had just drawn on the ground slowly disappeared, as well as the ground returned to normalcy, while the spirit stone he placed in the eye rebounded to him. What an ingenious setup. Chuckling, Su Zimo picked up the spirit stone and headed to level 2. The moment he entered level 2, his body broke into a shudder. He was faced with a towering mountain covered in clouds and surrounded by water and greenery. There was a magnificent palace that looked like a paradise. Su Zimo realized that he had entered an illusionary formation. From level 2 on, the disciples' ability to dispel formations would be tested. The principle of dispelling formations was simple. One had to locate the core of the formation, also known as the formation eye. The higher the grade of the formation, the more formation eyes there were. Grade 1 formations only contained a single formation eye. Grade 2 formations had two. If one wanted to dispel a Grade 2 formation, it wasn't enough to merely locate one formation eye. They had to find and destroy both in order to dispel the formation. Even though it sounded simple, a formation eye was difficult to locate within the formation. Take the illusion formation before Su Zimo for example. The eye could be a simple blade of grass, a cloud floating above, a stone on the mountain, or even a fish swimming within the river. A formation contained a world within itself. If it was someone who knew nothing about formations, they might not be able to locate and destroy the formation eye within its parallel world even if they spent their entire life and effort. However, array formation masters could locate the formation eye based on their understanding of formations and guts alongside logical analysis. One thing was certain, formation eyes were definitely far from ordinary. Even if they may look to be normal, careful analysis would uncover their unusualness. Brilliant array formation masters would make sure to conceal their formation eyes so carefully that it would be difficult to detect. Euro. Right as Su Zimo entered level 2 of 10 Formations Pagoda, a group of disciples from Array Peak were headed towards it. The leader amongst them wore black robes, looking cold and cool. His eyes were indifferent with his hands behind his back. Even though he was only at level 9 Qi condensation, he had an air of superiority. This was Zhongwen. A publicly recognized talent amongst the trial disciples and a genius of the sect, he was the top of Array Peak and was already an elementary array formation master. He was currently stuck at level 7 of the 10 Formations Pagoda. Today, he came to challenge the 10 Formations Pagoda again to see if he could clear level 7. Even if he couldn't, he wanted to break the record of his previous clear time of level 6. Knowing that Zhongwen was here to challenge the pagoda today, many disciples from Array Peak came to watch and surrounded him. Senior Brother Zhong, I wish you success this time. Be the first person in the history of our sect to clear level 7. Senior Brother Zhong is a level 9 Qi refinement warrior right now and he still has many chances before entering Foundation establishment. Who knows, he might even be able to clear level 8 in the future. Many disciples of Array Peak complimented him. Zhongwen was only in his 20s. Even though he seemed mature, he definitely felt gleeful upon hearing those words. No matter what, it was a proud accomplishment for anyone to be the top of any one of the 5 peaks. His gaze lingered on the stele at the right of the 10 Formations Pagoda, pride flashing through his eyes. Chapter 102, 10 Formations Stele. Chapter 102, 10 Formations Stele. The ancient stele was thick and heavy. At about 10 feet tall, it was called the 10 Formations Stele. It was of extraordinary significance and honor for any trial disciples of Ethereal Peak to have their names left behind on the 10 Formations Stele. Carrying with it the memories of Ethereal sect over thousands of years, the 10 Formations Stele had also witnessed the changes of the sect through those years. There were a total of 100 names on the stele, all of them geniuses through the history of Array Peak. Time was merciless and cultivators were no exception to that rule. Many of the genius cultivators on the list had passed away and the only trace left of them was probably on the stele. Behind every single name was the number of levels cleared as well as time taken. The higher the levels cleared, the further ahead one's name would be. For those at the same level, ranking would be dependent on time taken. The bottom 30-odd names on the 10 Formations Stele were trial disciples who had passed level 4. A huge chunk of names in the middle were disciples who had passed level 5 with the fastest amongst them using 12 hours. The tens of disciples on top were those who had cleared level 6. Zhongwen's name was right at the top of the list, he was the top of Array Peak. There was reason for Zhongwen to be proud and he was definitely qualified as well. After all, he had already taken over every single genius through the thousands of years of history of Array Peak, he was the true number 1 of Array Peak. A line of words was displayed on the first row of the 10 formations Stele. Zone 1, cleared level 6, 11 hours. Right then, level 2 of the 10 formations Pagoda suddenly shone with a bright light, attracting the attention of the Array Peak disciples. That unique light that belonged to a formation pattern would only shine if someone had cleared the level. Zhong Wen declared indifferently, to think that someone would be here earlier than me today to challenge the pagoda. Interesting. Greetings, Elder Luo. Zhong Wen arrived before the 10 formations pagoda and bowed slightly to the elder at the entrance. Elder Luo looked at Zhong Wen in appreciation. You're here so early to challenge the pagoda. Are you intending to clear level 7 this time round? Yes. Zhong Wen nodded. Pausing for a moment, he continued, I've learned quite a bit during this period of time. Even if I can't clear level 7, should be able to make a new record on the 10 formations Stele. The so-called record was naturally the one he had created. In Zhong Wen's eyes, no one from the 5 peaks could compare to him in array formations. What he wanted to do was to constantly challenge himself. Alright, I'll be awaiting your return from the challenge. Elder Luo smiled encouragingly and passed Zhong Wen a wooden badge. Nodding to the many Array Peak disciples behind him, Zhong Wen entered the 10 formations pagoda. Challenging the pagoda was something he was extremely familiar with. Without hesitation, spirit chi seeped out from his fingers and he started drawing the moment he entered level 1. His choice of supplementary formation was the simplest type. Challenging the pagoda wasn't only a test of the number of levels cleared, one had to take into account the time taken too. Zhong Wen was naturally not going to waste any time. Before long, he was done drawing the formation pattern. Placing a spirit stone in the formation eye, the entrance to level 2 appeared. Retrieving his spirit stone, Zhong Wen rushed up to level 2 swiftly. Similar to Su Zimo, Zhong Wen found himself transported into an illusionary formation the moment he entered level 2. Looking calm, he surveyed his surroundings and walked about casually, stopping from time to time to observe the ground. 15 minutes later, he heaved out a sigh gently and summoned his flying sword, piercing it at the ground nearby. All of a sudden, the surrounding illusion disappeared and the entrance to level 3 came into sight. Zhong Wen was in excellent condition as he walked confidently to level 3. Su Zimo was in the level 3 trap formation at the moment as well. Even though they were in the same level, they were in different formations and neither would see nor affect the other. Outside the 10 formations pagoda. When they saw the burst of light emit from level 2, the crowd gasped. Senior brother Zhong only took around 15 minutes to clear 2 levels. That's slightly faster than before. Of course. He wouldn't have come for the challenge if he wasn't confident. More and more trial disciples were gathered and they heard about Zhong Wen's challenge of the pagoda today. An hour passed and a bright light shone from level 3. He passed. Yes, an hour. That's around the same as before. The disciples of Array Peak discussed. I wonder how long senior brother Zhong will take for level 4. I remember he took 2 hours previously. Actually, level 4 is not too bad. It's just a singular formation after all. Level 5 is the most difficult since it's a combination formation. The difficulty is doubly high. Time passed by quickly and another 2 hours were gone. A bright light shone from level 4. Just as the shocked disciples were about to speak, a bright light shone from level 3. That caused a clamor. Huh? There's someone else other than senior brother Zhong challenging the pagoda today? Some of the Array Peak disciples that had arrived later asked in confusion. Many disciples of Array Peak would normally choose to avoid the pagoda if Zhong Wen was challenging it. Even though all challengers were unaffected by one another, they would undoubtedly feel the pressure knowing that they were doing it at the same time as the number 1 of Array Peak and that would affect their performance as well. That person sure is ambitious to want to challenge at the same time as senior brother Zhong, someone scoffed coldly. I wonder who he is. He'll definitely suffer at level 4. Fufu, I'll wait here and see that person get kicked out of the 10 formations pagoda in a wretched state. Many Array Peak disciples were waiting to see a joke. Shocked, Elder Luo turned to look at the 10 Formations Pagoda as he recalled a handsome disciple in green. Disciple of Weapon Peak? Chuckling and shaking his head, Elder Luo murmured to himself, to think that the lad could clear level 3 as well. Yes, someone like that is definitely talented in formations. I wonder why he was sent to Weapon Peak to begin with. In truth, notwithstanding the many Array Peak disciples, even Elder Luo did not expect much of Su Zimo. To Elder Luo, even if Su Zimo could get through level 3, he would definitely fail at level 4. After all, level 4 was a killing formation. Every single step within was filled with danger. Any misstep and one could lose their life there. Under such tense circumstances, most people would be so rattled that they would instinctively break the wooden badge and be transported out, let alone compose themselves to dispel the formation. For a first-timer like Su Zimo who had never experienced a killing formation, it was a level he couldn't possibly clear. Not only did level 4 test one's understanding towards formations, it also tested one's determination and courage in life and death. How should one maintain their composure within a treacherous situation to calmly analyze the formation while detecting the loophole within? That was the key to clearing level 4. However, neither the Array Peak disciples or Elder Luo understood Su Zimo. Compared to the knights in Song Lang Mountain Range, the danger posed by a grade 1 killing formation was way too weak for Su Zimo. Furthermore, he possessed an ability no one else had, spirit perception. The current state of Array Peak was akin to a calm lake where Su Zimo's appearance was like a pebble dropping into the lake. Right then, no one realized that the pebble would not merely cause a few ripples. Instead, it was about to whip up a torrential tide that would shock all 5 peaks and the sect. Chapter 103, 17 Seconds. Chapter 103, 17 Seconds. Su Zimo, who had just entered level 4 of the 10 Formations Pagoda, did not know that someone had cleared it previously. He did not know that there were more Array Peak disciples gathered outside and that he was starting to gain attention as well. Level 4 was the killing formation. Amongst the formations, killing formations were the most powerful. If a cultivator was stuck in it without any means of dispelling and he wasn't strong enough, he would definitely die within. Cultivators could hold out temporarily against the formation. However, there would come a time where they would get exhausted and by then, they would be destroyed by the formation. However, killing formations were the easiest to dispel across the various formations. The main goal of a killing formation was to kill and destroy everything. As the saying goes, things would reverse at extremities. In this world, there was no such thing as absolute destruction. Therefore, life force was bound to exist within the destruction. If one could locate the life force, the killing formation would naturally be dispelled. Not far ahead was a volcano spouting billowing ashes. The moment Su Zimo was transported in, a rumble boomed out from the mountain. Immediately after, scarlet lava gushed out from the peak of the volcano as gigantic flaming rocks plummeted down from the skies endlessly in an earth-shattering manner. Suffocating black smoke filled the air and blocked one's vision. It was as though the world was ending in an apocalypse. Faced with such devastating destruction, most cultivators would shatter their protection talisman and run off instinctively, finding a place to hide from the falling lava. However, that was an extremely unwise move in reality. This was a formation. Unless they dispelled it, cultivators had no way of escaping. That also meant to say that no matter the speed of the cultivator, they wouldn't be able to escape the radius of the falling lava within the formation. With a calm expression, Su Zimo summoned his flying sword and leapt down. Instead of retreating, he advanced. All the plants on the ground were burnt to a crisp as bubbling lava that emitted a scorching heat flowed. In the blink of an eye, the ground beneath Su Zimo had turned into a scarlet sea of lava, leaving only rocks that had yet to melt. For other array formation masters, they would have to analyze how to dispel the killing formation while avoiding its power. However, that was no the case for Su Zimo. Through the dangers of the killing formation, there was only a single spot where Su Zimo's spirit perception had no reaction to. That must be where the loophole of the killing formation was. Because illusionary and trap formations merely aimed to bewitch and restrain instead of kill, Su Zimo's spirit perception was of no use since he could not sense any danger. He had to rely on his own capabilities to dispel those two types of formations. However, his spirit perception worked in killing formations, turning everything else into mere decorations. Before long, Su Zimo arrived on a single rock. It looked ordinary like any other rocks protruding from the lava and only had room to fit a single person. However, one could avoid all the dangers in the killing formation just by standing motionlessly on the rock. If anyone else saw this, their jaws would definitely drop wide open. As the torrential lava rained down through the world, a man in green stood without suffering any bit of damage at all. However, locating this rock was not enough to dispel the killing formation. After all, the volcano was spewing continuously and Su Zimo did not know when it would stop. He can't wait here forever. After pondering for a long time, he looked at the seemingly ordinary rock he was standing on and smiled. Logically speaking, this should be the formation I. However, if it was a wrong deduction and the killing formation was not dispelled by destroying the rock, the person trapped in the formation would fall right into the lava and be burnt to a crisp. The array formation master who had set this formation had indeed gave it much thought. This was not just a test of the cultivator's dispel capabilities, it was also a test of their courage. Would you dare to break away your only lifeline? In reality, the array formation master's mindset was actually aligned with how killing formations worked. Both required the trapped cultivator to seek life through desperate times. Smiling, Su Zimo stomped down on his foot. Bam! The rock beneath him broke apart and Su Zimo's body descended. Right as he was about to drop into the lava, everything around him disappeared and reality set in once more. The entrance of level 5 had appeared. Su Zimo strolled towards it. At that moment, outside 10 Formation's Pagoda. When the light of level 4 shone not long after level 3's light was lit up, the discussions of the disciples outside came to a halt. Everyone looked at the nearby 10 Formation's Pagoda with widened eyes and gaping mouths. They could not recover from the shock. Elder Luo sensed it and looked back. When he saw the light of level 4 shining, he was stumped as well. That lad had cleared level 4? Also, it was so fast. It seemed like it only took 17 seconds. How was that possible? Countless questions surfaced in Elder Luo's mind as he frowned. What did I just see? Level 4's formation pattern had lit up as well? From the moment he stepped into level 4 to the lights shining, it only took a few seconds. How could he be so fast? Who is that person? After a brief moment of silence, sounds were heard from the crowd as the Array Peak disciples discussed fervently. Even the number 1 of Array Peak, Zhongwen, took 2 entire hours to clear level 4. How did that man dispel level 4's formation using just a couple of seconds? I've got it. Suddenly, a disciple exclaimed, there must be 2 people in 10 Formation's Pagoda other than senior brother Zhong. So, someone had cleared level 3 previously and another person cleared level 4. Right. That must be the case. Another disciple nodded furiously in enlightenment. Yes, it must be a coincidence that someone had managed to clear level 4 right after the first person cleared level 3. Damn, that scared me. I told you it was impossible. The Array Peak disciples relaxed slightly as the crowd calmed down. After all, many of them were unable to dispel level 4's formation yet. If they knew that someone had cleared it using only a few seconds, it would be a huge blow for them. Upon hearing the conclusion in the crowd, Elder Luo lowered his head slightly to conceal his shock. No one knew better than him that from morning till now, only 2 people had entered the 10 Formation's Pagoda. Since Zhongwen had already cleared level 4, there was only one other person who could have cleared level 4 using a couple of seconds. It was that trial disciple from Weapon Peak, Su Zimo. Elder Luo turned and glanced at the 10 Formation's Stele. The 30 overlines at the bottom were all formation geniuses who had cleared level 4. The fastest amongst them was Sita Boyan who had spent 1 hour. Even if Su Zimo failed at level 5, he would definitely leave a mark on the 10 formation stele above Situ Boyan's name. His time taken to clear level 4 was the fastest through history, 17 seconds. Chapter 104, Level 6. Chapter 104, Level 6. Right as Zhongwen entered level 5, Su Zimo ascended as well. This level was the final test for one to become an elementary array formation master. A combination array formation. Even between elementary array formation masters, some had deeper understanding towards formations. Some could combine 2, 3, or even more formations together. Level 5's combination formation comprised of 2 of either an illusory, trap or killing formation. The reason why it was difficult was partly because the combination of formation patterns was difficult to distinguish, making it easy to commit a wrong judgment. At the same time, a combination of 2 grade 1 formations implied that there were 2 formation eyes, and that increased the difficulty level of the formation. Even though grade 2 formations had 2 formation eyes as well, they were still more difficult to dispel than 2 grade 1 formations combined together. The reason for that was simple. Destroying a formation eye was equivalent to destroying half of the combination formation. With that, the remaining half would be much easier to dispel. However, destroying a formation eye in a grade 2 formation would not dispel the formation entirely. Su Zimo stood on the spot and sensed his surroundings, realizing instantly that he was in a trap and illusion combination formation. My luck's average. Su Zimo muttered softly. Things would have been much simpler for Su Zimo if it was a combination formation with a killing formation. However, given his current understanding of formations, clearing level 5 wasn't difficult, it was just a matter of time. Time slowly passed. The array peak disciples outside of 10 formations Pagoda did not leave. At the moment, most of the people's attention was not on Zhongwen. Instead, they were curious as to who the person who cleared the level 4 formation was. As evening approached, level 5 lit up. That must be senior brother Zhong. Yes. He broke another record once more. He's even faster than before. I wonder if he can clear level 6. The disciples began to discuss once more. From level 6 on, it was a test of the array formation master's understanding of grade 2 formations. Similar to level 1, level 6 only required laying a supplementary type of grade 2 formation. The formation patterns of a grade 2 formation were much more complex than a grade 1 and its difficulty was doubly so. Any slight mistake would render the formation a failure. The array peak disciples knew that 2 hours was all it took to know whether or not one could pass level 6. Everyone waited patiently. 2 hours were nearly up and there was still no sign of light from level 6. All of a sudden, a blur appeared at the entrance of 10 formations Pagoda as a figure appeared. Everyone's hearts skipped a beat as they looked over. It was Zhongwen. Ugh. It's a pity, but I failed level 6. Actually, it's a good thing. You took a faster time clearing the first 5 levels, so you've already broken your previous record, senior brother Zhong. Because he had gone through the killing formation of the 10 formations Pagoda, Zhongwen's clothes were tattered and he looked somewhat wretched. However, his expression was still calm and firm as he looked towards the 10 formations stele. A bedazzling bright light shone on the first row of the 10 formations stele. The name written was still Zhongwen and it was still stated that he had cleared level 5. However, the time taken had changed from 11 hours to 10 hours and 15 minutes. Zhongwen heaved a sigh of relief. His arm had quivered slightly at the critical juncture of setting up his grade 2 formation. As such, there were some deviations in his formation patterns and his previous efforts were wasted. However, he had still gained something for breaking his own record once more. Elder Luo smiled. Not bad, not bad. Work harder when you get back and try to break through level 6 before you become an inner sect disciple. Don't worry, Elder Luo. Level 6 can't stop me, Zhongwen replied confidently. He believed that as long as he spent more time researching, he would be able to get through level 6. Cupping his fists, Zhongwen bid farewell to Elder Luo and nodded to the array peak disciples behind him before turning to leave. He walked a few steps before realizing something strange. The reason why those array peak disciples had gathered was because they wanted to see if he could break a new record. However, now that he had left, they did not seem like they had any intention of leaving. Now that night had descended and those disciples weren't attempting to challenge the pagoda, what were they waiting for? Zhongwen stopped in his tracks and swept his gaze across the faces of those array peak disciples. He realized that everyone was looking at 10 Formations Pagoda from time to time as though they were waiting for something. Was someone challenging the pagoda? But who else other than him would attract all of those audiences for their challenge of the pagoda? Frowning, Zhongwen came beside an array peak disciple and asked in a seemingly casual manner, "Junior brother Wang, what are you guys waiting for?" "Ah." That disciple was somewhat flustered as he stammered, There are 2 other people challenging the pagoda right now and one of them made it through level 4 as well. However, we don't know who it is. I'm waiting to see who that person is." "Yeah, it's just out of curiosity," another disciple smiled awkwardly. After all, they had accompanied Zhongwen for the pagoda challenge initially. As such, they naturally felt somewhat embarrassed that they were still lingering on with their attention on someone else despite Zhongwen wanting to leave. Zhongwen's expression relaxed as he chuckled and waved it off. "Alright, since I've got nothing on, I'll wait and see too." The moment he said that, level 5 lit up. The crowd was in an uproar. He cleared level 5? That's enough to leave a name on the 10 Formations Stele. Amazing. Who is that person? When he heard the discussions of the crowd, Zhongwen's expression turned serious. Even though he knew that grade 2 formation patterns were much more complex and this person would not be able to clear level 6, for some reason, he felt uneasy. It felt as though his status was being threatened. Elder Luo's gaze lingered for a long time on level 5. Where did that disheveled old man find this treasure? To think that he's an array formation genius. However, how did he manage to clear the killing formation in just 17 seconds? Could the formation I have appeared right beside that lad? Was it luck? Elder Luo frowned in thought. The array peak disciples who already had no intention of leaving were even more determined to stay on after seeing the mysterious person clear level 5. Level 6 was a test of grade 2 formation skills. An outcome would be determined within 2 hours. None of them minded waiting for another 2 hours. The night got darker. Having spent an entire day waiting in front of the 10 Formations Pagoda, even the Chi Refinement warriors were showing signs of fatigue. An hour has passed. It'll be soon. Yes, let's wait and see. Right after that disciple spoke, a bright light shone from level 6 and illuminated the night skies. Silence. Hundreds of array peak disciples raised their heads and watched with agape mouths, forgetting to even breathe momentarily. Everyone's expressions were frozen. Their eyes were filled with complex emotions, shock, confusion, amazement, surprise. In only an hour, Su Zimo had cleared level 6. Elder Luo bolted upright and looked at the shining formation pattern light on level 6, lamenting internally, "Holy shit, holy shit. A true formation genius has appeared in our sect." Chapter 105, Turbulent Undercurrent. Chapter 105, Turbulent Undercurrent. A new record for the 10 Formations Pagoda was born. It was so sudden, unexpected, and shocking. This was supposed to be the most ordinary day on Array Peak. However, everything changed the moment level 6 lit up. The birth of a new record also implied that Zhongwen was dethroned from his number 1 status in Array Peak from this moment. Many Array Peak disciples turned to look at Zhongwen subconsciously. His expression was extremely ugly as he glared fiercely at level 6. Because he was gripping his fists so tightly, both his arms were shivering in rage. Everyone could more or less empathize with how Zhongwen was feeling at the moment, as there was inevitably a look of pity in their gazes. It was a hard pill to swallow even for anyone else in Zhongwen's position. Closing his eyes for a long time, Zhongwen let out a deep breath. By the time he opened his eyes once more, his gaze shone with a renewed confidence. At that, Elder Luo nodded to himself. To be able to walk out of such a trauma that quickly meant that Zhongwen had a good character. His accomplishments in the future wouldn't be bad too. Very well. There's finally someone who can give me pressure. Smiling, Zhongwen muttered to himself, it's been a long time since I've experienced this feeling. Even though I don't know who you are, your appearance will force out the best in me. With that said, Zhongwen looked at the 10 Formations Pagoda deeply once more and turned to leave without hesitation. Many Array Peak disciples understood that before long, Zhongwen would be back to challenge the 10 Formations Pagoda once more. At that time, the number 1 of Array Peak would be determined by the person who clears level 6 in the shortest period of time. Even after Zhongwen's departure, many of the Array Peak disciples had no intention of leaving. Everyone was even more curious to see who this mysterious person who was challenging the pagoda was. The thought of the challenger clearing level 7 did not cross everyone's minds. From the looks of it, it wouldn't be long before the person was sent out. However, time continued to pass and yet the challenger had not appeared. It was as though he was residing within the 10 Formations Pagoda silently. The night passed just like that. The morning sun rose and the many Array Peak disciples before the 10 Formations Pagoda were getting sleepy after staying awake for the entire night. Casually, they stretched their bodies and gathered their spirits. What's that person doing inside? He should come out if he can't continue. Why is he taking so long? I don't know, but I can't take it anymore. I've got to head back and rest. A worn-out disciple shook his head, no intending to waste any more time here. Yeah, I'm heading back too. After all, this person will definitely leave his name on the 10 Formations Stele after clearing level 6. I'll just see who he is then, another disciple remarked. Right then, someone sped towards them on a flying sword. When the person approached, everyone focused their attention over. It was Zhongwen who had left the previous night. He was back after a single night. One could imagine how he must have spent all his time and energy into researching on grade 2 formations rather than sleep the previous night. Arriving before Elder Luo, Zhongwen declared deeply, Elder, I'd like to challenge the 10 Formations Pagoda. Very well. Elder Luo nodded his head and passed Zhongwen a wooden badge. Upon receiving it, Zhongwen turned and entered the 10 Formations Pagoda. Upon seeing that, the disciples who planned on leaving hesitated. Cough, cough. Perhaps we can hold out for another day to see if Senior Brother Zhong's able to take down that person and reclaim the first spot on 10 Formations Stele. Fair enough, let's wait another day. The disciples ultimately lost to their curiosity and chose to stay. In the blink of an eye, yet another day had passed and it was dusk. The challenger had yet to appear. As for Zhongwen, he was at level 6 once more. After a while, level 6 lit up and everyone was shocked. He cleared it. How long did Senior Brother Zhong take? More than an hour? That means he still lost? Yeah, by a little. The many Array Peak disciples sighed. Before long, Zhongwen was sent out of the 10 Formations Pagoda and he glanced at the 10 Formations Pagoda. The first row of the 10 Formations Stele shone brightly. Even though it was still his name, the words at the back had changed. Zhongwen, cleared level 6, 1 hour 15 minutes. Looking at the 10 Formations Stele, Zhongwen frowned and asked around, that person is not out yet? That's right, one of the disciples yawned and replied listlessly. The record on the 10 Formations Stele would only be updated when the challenger left the 10 Formations Pagoda. That mysterious person who had cleared level 6 merely took an hour, faster than Zhongwen. However, for Zhongwen's name to still be on the 10 Formations Stele, that meant that the challenger was still inside the 10 Formations Pagoda. That person has lasted for so long in level 7? Zhongwen scoffed coldly internally, let's see how long more you can hold out. Taking one last look at the 10 formations Stele, Zhongwen left. The difference between the both of them wasn't great at merely 15 minutes. He had the confidence of surpassing that challenger during his next challenge of the 10 formations Pagoda. Many Array Peak disciples could not wait any longer and chose to head back and rest for the night before returning the next morning. Some of the disciples who were unwilling to give up remained waiting, bent on witnessing the person who created the new record. Yet another night passed. By now, the disciples that were waiting outside the 10 formations Pagoda were in a mess. Some of them were asleep while others would open their eyes and look towards the 10 formations Pagoda drowsily from time to time. There was no activity in the 10 formations Pagoda throughout the entire night. The challenger had yet to appear. Disciples who were impatient had already asked Elder Luo about who the person was and if he was still inside the 10 formations Pagoda. However, Elder Luo merely shook his head and did not reveal the person's identity, merely stating that the person was still within. That's strange. How is that person not out yet? He's already spent 2 whole nights in level 7. We're already exhausted from just waiting and doing nothing. It's hard to imagine how that person is going to survive while spending a great deal of effort on dispelling the formation. Right then, a disciple suddenly remarked, "Wait, aren't there 2 other people in the 10 formations Pagoda other than Senior Brother Zhong? Why is the other person not out yet?" Suddenly, the discussions quietened down as everyone's eyes flashed in bewilderment as though they had just recalled something frightening. The presence of 2 individuals in the 10 formations Pagoda was just their speculation. The reason for that was because they could not believe that someone would be able to get through level 4's killing formation in such a short period of time. But now, a more realistic possibility existed. There was only one person inside the 10 formations Pagoda. That person had truly taken a few mere seconds to clear level 4. It was the same person who had created the new record. The atmosphere in front of the 10 formations Pagoda was stiff as no one spoke. It was as though an invisible arm had choked them into suffocating. Right then, Zhongwen arrived once more. He entered the 10 formations Pagoda again, bent on breaking the record of the mysterious challenger. This was already the morning of the 3rd day. In the past 3 days, events on Array Peak gradually spread among the 5 peaks. A turbulent undercurrent was charging beneath the calm lake's surface, ready to burst forth at any moment. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.